The Planning and Land Use Management Committee. It's Tuesday, January 15th. I've been joined by the Honorable Council members, Jose Huizar and Rich Englander. We have several items on the agenda today, but before we get started, just some quick housekeeping. One is that the acoustics are not the best in this room, so if you could refrain from conversations. If you need to have a conversation, please take it outside. It allows us to understand what's being said. When you do come up to the microphone, please give us your name and address. Some of you might have written some very eloquent letters, but we are giving you 2 minutes to be at the microphone. So if you can get to your conclusions or your main point, try to do it within those 2 minutes. Some of you might get through your intro and your letter and your main body, but you didn't make your point, and then that's where it gets a little awkward. So if you just drive your main point, that would be great. If you find yourself listening to a previous speaker and they've said everything you wanted to say and don't have much more to add that's different, you're welcome to say, I agree with the previous speaker, and then give us whatever is different. That would help us move this meeting along. We appreciate your cooperation. And let's just respect each other's opinion. If you don't agree with someone, you don't need to boo or clap. Just show some courtesy and allow us to move forward. So Happy New Year, everybody. It's my first committee of 2013. For some of us, it's our last 6 months. For others, our last 6 years. But you got what? How many years left? If God wills it. With that being said, let's dig in. We do have several items that can be moved on consent if my colleagues agree. I'll start with one with some specific directions, and I can go through the list. But one we can move on consent, and we do have an appointment of Winnie Y. Davis. Note and file in as much as the appointment has been withdrawn. See, it helps to read. So the letter has been submitted from the mayor, and it's on file. Okay. But we could move on items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on consent. Seeing no cards. Can I have a second on that? Okay. Are we okay with that? All right. So then that takes us to items 2, 8, and 9 as special. Before we dig in, I'd like to ask our planning director, Mr. LeGrand, if you have a report.
Hi, Mike LeGrand for the record. Yes, a quick report for the committee members. We've had some really good, well-attended public hearings recently. Last week we had the Los Angeles Airport specific plan for a hearing officer hearing. We had over 500 people in attendance. We had a very good hearing, got a lot of public input and a lot of comments, and we'll be transmitting that project forward to the City Planning Commission and onto the City Council in the next couple of months. We also had a very well-attended public hearing for a project called Wyvernwood that was, again, very well-attended. We had translation equipment available, and it was a very good hearing where we got a lot of great input from the community members and other stakeholders, and we're happy to move forward on that project also. In addition, there are the 3 South Los Angeles community plans, West Adams, South Los Angeles, and Southeast Los Angeles, are all out for public review and currently available at local libraries as well as on the City Planning Department webpage. And we're really excited to have those 3 South LA community plans come forward. And I'd like to thank the staff, Faisal Robles and Ken Bernstein and Craig Weber and the entire policy team for getting those community plans out. And so we're excited to see those plans move forward for more hearings and public outreach, then on to the City Planning Commission, and then forwarding them to the City Council with a recommendation. And that concludes my report, and I'll be available for any questions.
And I understand that the department is benefiting from a crop of new employees.
Yes, we do. I'd like to, at the next plum hearing, if I can, introduce our new staff members that have joined the planning department. We've made a number of key assignments to new planners to be able to utilize the positions the City Council gave us so generously last year that are all cost recoverable positions in our case processing section to help us deal with the high volume of cases we're still experiencing even with the weak economy. And so we're happy to move those economic development projects forward, and I'd be happy to come and bring the new planners here to introduce you to them at our next plum hearing.
Okay.
We also have 2 promotions we made in the department to senior city planner. Mr. Tom Rothman has been reported from city planner to senior city planner, as well as Esne Malian has been promoted to senior city planner from city planner. And so we're really excited to see those promotions take place.
Great. But it won't be like a ritual, right, when we get new employees into the department?
No, there will be no hazing or
Okay,
anything
all right.
like that, but we will
that's
have
good to
them introduce themselves as committee members so you know who they are when you see them in the building.
All right. All right, folks. Great. Well, thank you for that report. My understanding is that we do have a card on 4 from the applicant, and I want to make sure that the applicant understands it's on consent. That means it passed. That means it's something that you'd want. So I'm not sure if you are compelled to speak anymore. This is item number 4. Are you still here? Okay, I'm assuming you don't want to speak anymore, right? Okay, great. Really smart person. Okay, so then we'll just move on. Okay, item 2 first. I want to say congratulations to everybody in terms of getting us to this point. We still got to do a little bit more work, but all the artists, all the folks who put their heart and soul into this process, all the planners involved, all the community hearings. I know it's been a long trail, but we finally got here. And I want to thank you for your hard work. I think the whole mural movement is part of the city's history, to be able to preserve it and move it forward in a way that we can continue celebrating our culture and our talent is truly important for future generations. So with that being said, I want to thank my colleagues for their patience and their hard work with the respective staffs and making sure we are able to get to this point. So let's hear from our planning staff first, and let's have a recap. Then if you can give us the recommended changes, and if you can highlight the public input process, that's important for the record. And then we can go from there, and we'll hear from Felicia Filer from the Cultural Affairs Department with her summary. Mr. Rothman.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Tom Rothman from the Planning Department. I'm going to give you a brief overview of where we are right now with the mural ordinance and where it's been. This is the second time it's been to this committee. It was last year at November 20th. It was also at the City Planning Commission twice. And we've also recently included changes, so I'm going to talk about those also. When it was finally adopted by the City Planning Commission, the Commission had made about 5 amendments to the original ordinance that was proposed by staff. They changed 5 things. One, there is now compensation to property owners will now be allowed that had been omitted or had been banned in the original ordinance. Billboard lighting standards must now apply to murals. That was not in the original ordinance. Digitally printed images would have been permitted with building department and fire department approval. They reduced the number of units where a mural would have been allowed. Originally, our original ordinance, which mirrored the Portland, Oregon's ordinance, precluded murals to be placed on single-family homes, duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes. The City Planning Commission reduced that to just be a ban on single-family homes. So that's what the Commission did. And lastly, we originally said a mural cannot exceed the height of a structure, even an existing mural. So we reversed that. Existing murals, there are several where murals actually go higher than a building. It would not be allowed on new murals, but on existing murals, that would still be allowed. At that time, at the Commission hearing, CD14 submitted a letter with some additional proposed changes. I listed them in the report of January 4th. They wanted us to include a separate definition for vintage murals. They wanted the inclusion of a separate definition for original art installations. They wanted a reference to the city's Works of Art program to both the definition of murals and for art installations. They wanted us to include the phrase original work of visual art. Number 5 was to allow existing murals to exceed the height of the structure. And the last thing that was requested was for us to delete the 5-unit minimum requirement. So at the time, so 2 of those things overlap. So we did, in fact, number 5, allow existing murals to exceed the height of the structure. That was their 5th item. Their 6th item was to delete the 5-unit minimum. The City Planning Commission had reduced it to 2. So there was a little bit of a differentiation there. But the intent was to follow through. And the remaining 4 I'm going to go over clearly. We agree with some of them. We propose changes. Some we don't. The first one, which was to include a separate definition for vintage murals, we do think that's an appropriate amendment to this ordinance. What this ordinance proposes is that there will be, once the ordinance is adopted, new murals will go through this registration process. Existing murals that are not yet registered through the Department of Cultural Affairs currently maintains a database of murals. If you're not on that database, we propose to create a 6-month amnesty program where you can register your mural within that 6-month time frame so that you can become a legal mural. After that, then if there are still existing murals out there that have not been registered, they still will have a chance. However, they might get cited by Building and Safety. Building and Safety will go out on a complaint by complaint basis to check the validity and the legality of each existing mural. So that's a big point here. Their second requirement, or their second request, was to include a separate definition for original art installations. We weren't sure what the necessity of that third category would have been, and since digitally printed images right now are going to be an allowed type of mural, we didn't see a reason for a third category to place them in. The third item was to include a reference to the city's Works of Art program. We thought that was an acceptable idea. We'll include references to works of art, and that will help the Department of Cultural Affairs set up an easement program in the future on city-owned property. And their 4th item was to include the phrase an original work of visual art. We thought using the term one of a kind for existing murals and new murals would be more appropriate. So we went through them point by point, and then at the last Plum hearing, CD14 sent an additional motion in that was not discussed at the hearing, but those 3 items that were in the motion were already being addressed with my comments from the 6 items from that previous memo. And then I just wanted to lastly say that at the last hearing, there was a lot of discussion about the number of units, and that was not really resolved. Right now, what the ordinance in front of us is it stands at a ban on single-family homes.
Right. Okay. Any questions
So
for
that's my quote.
Mr. Rothman? See no questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rothman. And next, I'd like to call up our representative from the Department of Cultural Affairs, Ms. Filer, if you're here. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Felicia Filer, with Director of Public Art from Cultural Affairs. I'd like to pass this out to the committee. And my comments are basically going to augment Tom's report. As you know, the next step, once the ordinance is passed, the Department of Cultural Affairs will be responsible for developing the administrative rules and the mural permit process. So what I'm presenting to you today is a proposed flowchart of what the registration process will look like for the various applicants who will be interested in placing murals on their private property. And I'd like to take you through that. It's quite simple. And on page 2 is an outstanding issue that Cultural Affairs was charged with from the Planning Commission hearing in October, which is to develop a technical definition of a digitally hand-rendered and hand-printed mural. So I'd like to take you through both of those documents. On the left part of the chart, what you'll see is a description of the type of owner who will most likely be applying for a mural registration permit. If a private property owner may want to place a mural on their property, They would obviously identify the wall, secure the artist, have the artist produce a mural design, rendering, have that image be presented to the neighborhood involvement process, register the mural at Cultural Affairs, and then record a covenant agreement with the county in order for that registration to be complete. And this process is the same if an artist wants to approach a private property owner about placing a mural on their walls. They too would have to secure permission of the property owner, present that mural design to a neighborhood involvement process, and register the mural with Cultural Affairs. The same process would be applicable to a private residence. If someone wants to place a mural on their private residence, they would also have to present a mural design and have a community neighborhood involvement process even for their residential property. And then finally, if there are private property owners that have pre-existing murals and the murals that are not already in our database, then they would present to us documentation, historic documentation that clearly demonstrates that the mural was up prior to the passing of the ordinance, and we would register that mural in our database. So the process is fairly straightforward. It is it applies to all types of applicants, and in our application process and the administrative rules will obviously be respond to whatever version of the ordinance that the council passes in the coming months. As I mentioned at the October Planning Commission meeting, the commissioners asked us to make sure to define a working definition of what we consider a digital hand-rendered and hand-printed mural. And what we have presented before you is a series of criteria that we believe would enable artists who work within this medium to produce a mural that is different, using the technology that is different than commercial advertisers. And the criteria that we've identified is really geared toward artwork using very specific materials, very specific pigments, higher quality images, very specific substrates to print those images on, as well as the size of the individual panels. So we think this criteria will allow us to differentiate between commercially printed images and fine art murals using digital technology.
Let me play devil's advocate here. I'm an owner. I have a wall in the interior of my property, and this wall can only be seen by my family. It won't be observed from the outside at all. And I want to put a mural on my wall. Do I have to register it?
If you put the mural up after the ordinance is passed, yes, you do.
Even though no one can see it, and even no one can see the mural except my own family,
I thought you said it was facing the street.
No, not facing the street.
Not facing the street, but it's in your backyard?
Yeah, it's in your backyard, your side yard. No one can see it from the public. It's your own private wall that is part of your garden, let's say.
No, and according to building and safety, if the mural is on the side property or in the back, if it's not a publicly facing image, then you won't require certainly registration through our process, nor is it violating any other building and safety codes. And Luke, you can speak to that, but we've had that conversation to sort of differentiate between
So it's
what
just for
side
the
of
record.
property, something can be placed.
Okay. All right. Any questions for either councilman?
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a quick question on the neighborhood involvement process. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. We are tentatively considering that notice would have to be given to the council office, to the bid group, to the neighborhood councils within that vicinity, and a posting of the public hearing within, I think it's like either 50 feet or 100 feet of the actual location. So
Do you have anything spelling out what you just said in writing at all? That process?
it will be spelled out in the administrative code and in the application. So right now what I'm presenting to you is just sort of the broad strokes, but the specifics and the details are still a work in progress.
Okay, and will that then will that be ready to come to council when the ordinance is ready? If that is
It
the
can
case?
be, yes.
If I could request that.
It should be.
Sure. You can read it.
Councilman, we did have in the ordinance, I don't know if you're looking at page B5, we do have the specifics of our neighborhood involvement requirement. I'll read it out loud. The mural ordinance administrative rules that are adopted by Cultural Affairs shall include a neighborhood involvement requirement for any applicant of a new original art mural to provide notice of and to hold a community meeting on the mural proposal at which interested members of the public may review and comment upon the proposed mural. No new original art mural shall be registered until the applicant certifies that he or she has completed the neighborhood involvement requirement. This is a procedural requirement only, and in no event will original art mural registration be granted or denied based upon its content.
And so with that, though, the admin code would be amended to include what the stakeholders, who those people are, as you spelled out. So that would be helpful. Terrific. Excellent. Thank you for the clarification.
Great. Okay. Any other questions, my colleagues? We can go into public comment if you like. All right. Our first speaker, and again, just speak into the microphone as close as you can. Wayne Healy, followed by Judy Baca. 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. This will be short and sweet. My name is Wayne Healy, and my mural team is known as East Los Streetscapers. We have murals still standing that have become landmarks after 40 years. More importantly, their images have been seen around the world and have served as visual ambassadors from the City of the Angels, Los Angeles. I have heard that our murals have inspired the younger generation of muralists. I stand here today to tell you that it is I and other senior artists who are inspired by today's 21st century generation of muralists. My generation of public artists never had to jump through the hoops and over the hurdles that today's public artists find separating their brushes from their walls of expression. My young colleagues have exhibited incredible grit and tenacity in coaxing, cajoling, and otherwise exclaiming at the glacial progress at the mural ordinance's passage. We all stand before you, our elected officials of this great city, and ask you to do the right thing. It is beyond comprehension that the city would stifle the unbounded energy and creative spirit of the homegrown artists. Allow us to continue painting the town in a chromatic chorus and glorious palette of images that tells the world they have ventured into a city that celebrates its past, present, and future through the eyes of its very own muralists. To mangle the line from Winston Churchill, never have so many muralists had to overcome so many obstacles in order to beautify their city for the world to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Healy. And I just personally want to thank Mr. Healy for his work. He did a tremendous mural on Pasadena Avenue and Broadway, Chicano Time Trip. And to see it come back to life with your team has been a real gift to the neighborhood. So I just want to thank you. Our next speaker, Judy Baca.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few things. I'll be very brief. I really believe that this ordinance, as it is now configured, is getting very close to something that we should get through. The hiatus on the painting on private buildings has been long enough, and the mural capital of the world has suffered, and I think we have sent a message to not only the young generation, but to all people, that Los Angeles is not a mural-friendly place. That said, I'd like to offer a couple of suggestions that I think are important. One is that the notion of a community process is really critical to the creation of murals that will have a relationship to the places that they're made and to the retention by the public. Second, that a vintage mural, in a sense, should be grandfathered in any possible way, meaning that giving us only 6 months to register those is an onus on the building owners who very oftentimes are very recalcitrant to take any action on behalf of the murals. So I would very much hate to see the loss of pieces because they have not been registered. So it would be important that not only the building owner, but other people could register them. The artist, the community groups that understand the piece to be an important thing. This third thing is that I'd like to speak in behalf of the digital mural and the attempt by Cultural Affairs now to create a definition. And I think it's a very usable and very workable and very friendly definition that expands the possibility of technological innovations for artists so that Los Angeles will not be left behind in terms of the processes that artists use, giving us the widest range of the possibility of the making of new works with digital techniques. We are changing every minute technologically. We can paint directly on screen, we can create new substrates that are amazing, and we need to give those opportunities to the new artists, the new generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the artist Baca has been known for her work within the river corridor in the valley, one of the longest murals on record, I believe. So congratulations. Professor David Diaz, and then we'll have Isabel Rojas Williams.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon,
friends,
sir.
colleagues, especially my friends here on the council. First of all, I want to thank the council members here for pursuing this. Two of them, Jose Huizar and Ed Reyes, for being staunch supporters for the muralists and really moving the city in phenomenal speed, even though for us it feels glacial. I feel that the current text is significant improvements over and really reflects the original draft ordinance that was presented to the Cultural Affairs Commission that had broad-based consensus in the city, and that was changed. However, there still remain two key problems. One, in some difference from Ms. Baca, is the location of vinyl. I do feel that it's problematic for Cultural Affairs to be responsible for issues related to the fire department and building and safety that are highly technical. And I think it's a duplication of services because we already have a location for any kind of vinyl product for review, and we're not going to really change the definition of vinyl. But why are we going to have a separate review in Cultural Affairs and one in Building and Safety? It's a duplication of process, and I also feel it sets the city up for future liability because I'm not convinced that Cultural Affairs has the technical expertise that the fire department requires for this kind of handling of materials. I think we should just leave it where it is in Building and Safety because we already have this. You can have the definition of original art, that's fine. The other one I think is I'm not really satisfied with the answer of the planning staff because right on your first page it says murals will not be allowed on single-family properties. Basically, the planning department is yet to give us a written explanation of why this is important. This will kill and dismantle a 4-year effort in Jefferson High School for the Green Alleys project of students, teachers, community, other universities to revitalize alleys in an area that's predominantly single family. We will not be, it'll make it illegal. So I strongly oppose that. Also, just really quickly on item 2 on your second, the same thing Judy raised in terms of the 6 months. There's another issue. There's a lot of indigent artists that will not be able to afford to register their art within a 6-month period. And I think we need to save and protect that. There should be some type of waiver based on income. We want to save those murals. They're more important than money in terms of this. In fact, there's some artists in this room that can't afford that. So I hope we address that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Diaz. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Give us your name.
Hello, my name is Isabel Rojas Williams, Executive Director of the Mural Conservancy of Los Angeles. For 10 long years, our younger generation of muralists has been looking forward to a day when they'll be able to create legally. We're almost there, and even though we're pleased with the progress of the Mural Ordinance has made of the past year, we ask for you to listen to the people who have been most affected by the Mural Moratorium, our younger generation of artists. These are the people who will continue to write our art history. We at MCLA look forward to a future of muralism that encourages younger generations of artists to contribute to our city's vibrant visual culture. We ask for your support to the changes suggested by the majority. I also agree with what Ms. Baca has said regarding to what the current drafts maintains, which is a fatal flaw by requiring all murals, even those created decades long before we had a ban or even signed ordinance, to be registered with DCA within 6 months or to be considered signs. This must be changed so that all existing murals are grandfathered at the date of adoption of the new ordinance, as Council instructed on October 19, 2011. I also agree with Dr. Diaz regarding to the digital mural printed images that he mentioned. We thank the committee for their efforts to have this ordinance approved and are excited for the next phase of art culture to blossom in Los Angeles. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. The next group of speakers, we have Barry Johnson, Debbie, I believe it's Weber, and then Ana Siqueiros. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi. Barry Johnson, Studio City stakeholder, and I would like to thank you for including the single-family home R1 exclusion amendment for new murals on this ordinance. Most people who own single-family homes put their heart and soul into their homes, not to mention their life savings, and it becomes their nest egg. And those of us in single-family homes, in an eagerness to protect the value of those homes, don't want to wake up one morning and find some vast change in our neighborhood, whatever that may be, that could potentially affect the value of our homes. I would like you to consider perhaps having a buffer zone where R1 zones are across the street from other zones that would allow murals. And if not that, at least extend the radius to at least 500 feet. So in a situation where a mural could be in a commercial or R3 zone with an R1 across the street, that an ample sampling of the R1s in the neighborhood would have notification. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Debbie Weber, Ana Siqueiros. Debbie Weber, Granada Hills. Hi.
Actually, it's Debbie Wubin. I am with the Granada Hills South Neighborhood Council.
I'm sorry.
I am the Director of Cultural Affairs on our council. I'm here. My concern is the neighborhood involvement requirement. I know it was already talked about that, and it talks about how an applicant will certify by going through neighborhood involvement. What we would like from the neighborhood council is for, on a new art mural installation, to come to the neighborhood council so that we can do the outreach to our community and our neighborhood, because we have the ability to do so through our newsletters and so forth, to put together so that we can have a forum so people can say how they feel about the particular mural wherever it may be going. Because this way it can certify that we can be behind it positively to go in, because we do want to keep our neighborhood flowing. We have, in Granada Hills South at least, we have a great neighborhood where everybody works together, and we want it to stay that way. So by involving our neighborhood as most as we can, and I think that if we can have the muralist bring their plan to the neighborhood council, through the plum committee even, and then we can let everybody know how what they want. I mean, this is just a thought that we threw out because we're trying to figure out what this all certified means here. It doesn't tell us anything.
Okay.
So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Ana Siqueiros, Yami Duarte, and Emily Winters.
First of all, I would like to thank everybody for coming this long way in so many years. My disposition on representing the Siqueiros Foundation of the Arts is as follows. This mural ordinance has been rectified by the Plum Committee is unwarranted for the following reasons. The prevention of allowing the freedom of expression through muralism is being hindered by being limited in restriction of implementing so much red tape, the usage of height and single house and fees. It is ludicrous to even consider that digital printed media, which is printed on vinyl, is even considered to be placed under the mural ordinance when it has and should remain under the sign ordinance, which requires the fire department to be involved just like any other banner. I do agree with Mr. Diaz of putting on more responsibility onto the Cultural Affairs Department as well. The ability to warrant digital printed as a mural is to show the world how unknowledgeable and ignorant you may be in the matters pertaining of fine art. It would be a detriment to the city of Los Angeles to be taken in a serious and international perspective of the world of artistic values. Please reconsider and restrict this from print altogether for the sake of the city of Los Angeles and its artists. Muralists have given the ordinance as they saw it. In reference to the March draft, do not continue to undermine their ability to work peacefully with you. So I thank you very much for as far as it's gone. I'd like to see more of this red tape be taken in consideration and to prove that you actually do have knowledge about the fine world internationally. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yami Duarte. And then Emily Winters.
Hi, my name's Yami. I'm a muralist. My mother's a muralist, and we've been making murals since I was little. There were never these regulations. But I like the process. We've been going through it, and I think we're a lot closer as well to something good. But the single-family restriction, I think, is no place planning should be involved in. I don't want to have to ask permission to decorate the front of my house. I don't think that that's an issue. And as an artist, I don't think that the NHC neighborhood councils are going to be able to be useful in really communicating all communities and what everybody wants. I think it's very specific. I don't think it's necessary. I think they're advisory, but they can't put that type of pressure on the artist. I think artist speech, and also I agree with the 6-month registration. Grandfathering is not enough. That all vintage murals should have a free registration period, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Emily Winters, then Norma Montoya.
Oops. Good afternoon. First, I've got a lot to say, so I'm going to try to talk fast. First of all, I'm so glad you listened to us. I see on these revisions that you actually did listen to some of us, and it makes me feel good. The second thing is that the Venice Neighborhood Council voted prematurely to accept the ordinance before we resolve these issues. I'm now working with them to revise their vote until this ordinance is completed before they decide to accept or reject. So I sent the three of you a letter that I had written about this, and I just wanted you to know that that's what's happened there. The single-family dwelling part is really disturbing me because I think all you need to do is to have a petition and the addresses of the people that live near the facility where you want to put a mural to decide by a majority vote whether or not to put a mural there. If I close off the street for an event, I have to get the majority of the neighbors to sign a petition with their address that they do live there. And that's all you need. I think I should be banned from the ordinance just to be vetted by the people who live near it. And the next thing I wanted to talk about was the maintenance and the longevity of the mural. It should be between the artist and the property owner, and because the artist is protected by the CARA Act and the VARA Act, which are national and statewide laws protecting the artist. So if the property owner wants to remove the mural, they have to give the artist 90 days notice. That's all that means, and I think you could save a lot of space by just making sure that those two acts are protected. And that's all I have to say, and thank you for all the good work.
Thank you, ma'am. Norma Montoya, and then Daniel Lajoda. Hi, good afternoon.
I'm Norma Montoya, and I live in East LA for, over 40 years. And I've been painting murals for about that time. And I really can't say it any better than the rest of my colleagues, but I'm here in support of what they had to say about the bans and the regulations against murals. And I've painted a number of murals on garage doors and single-family housing, and it's always been a good thing, and I hope we can continue to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Daniel Lahoda. And then we'll have Suzanne Thompson.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for pushing this forward. I know all of you have been working really hard to kind of get this going and pass this on, so I think it's fantastic. I think we're totally on the right track. I would love to see this move on to the next step. I do want to echo what a few of my colleagues and fellow community members have said. Number one, in the issue of the single-family dwellings, I think for a couple reasons that shouldn't be a consideration. Number one, because we do have the community involvement side of things, so regardless of the size of the building or who's involved, the neighborhood has to know and be informed of what's going on. So that kind of takes care of that side of things. And the other is the idea of creating an amnesty period for 6 months for people to register murals. I think that all the murals should be grandfathered in immediately and should be protected under the ordinance as it's written. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Our next speaker.
Good afternoon, Suzanne Thompson, 245 Rennie Avenue, Venice. And thank you, council members, for all of your diligence and work on this ordinance, and to the artists and the people and your staff and Tanner and everybody, because it's been a long time. I'd like to see an ordinance passed, and we're almost there. The single-family resident issue is a big one for us in Venice, and I think you know that. And I think it's already been stated about the process, and I think the process will take care of those communities that may not choose to have it on a single-family home. Venice is a cultural icon in the city, and I'd hate to see those murals taken away or to stop people from doing that. So I would like to see the ban on single-family homes removed, and also grandfathered in the vintage murals, and the community that have problems with the expenses, if there is some kind of procedure that they could get exempt from those fees. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Nani Olabisi. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name. And Olabisi. All right. And Zava Bijan. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Noni Olabisi, and I would like to give honor to God first for us, you guys even allowing us to be here. I am so totally opposed of the way that the mural, hand-painted murals and digital murals are in the same definition, because they're totally opposite of each other. They're not it's not compatible. You have hand-painted murals that is community involved, that it involves the experience of not only the artist, but the community. The community input is involved in the creation of the murals. I was actually hired as an artist out of Spark Social Public Art Research Center, who taught me how to stand and fight for what we want, and that is we want hand-painted murals to stay in this natural, authentic form and uphold the legacy of the great muralists that came before us. As an elder, I'm 58 years old and still painting. I would like to pass the baton to the young people and hand leadership over to them and inspire them to be great muralists in the original state and keeping this authenticity, you know what I'm saying? And just do that. Allow them to have the enjoyment of what it takes and what it means to develop themselves as an artist and speak for the community as well as the world. So that's what I'm totally opposed of, those two definitions. Like I said, it's not even compatible. You got vinyl compared to paint and hand painted. So, I think we should keep it in the way that it originally is. That is a muralist, hand-painted on walls. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Zara Bijan, muralist and educator. I'm just here to speak about youth involvement in painting murals. And in gang prevention programs, a lot of times the work that we do involves doing like alleys in local communities where residents of single-family homes donate their back wall to us. And what that does is that like creates this process that instills community ownership in the youth. And in order to put an end to the generation gap that led to the destruction of murals by taggers, because those taggers were never introduced to art programs and never had any other opportunities, we've got to fill that gap by providing space and providing opportunities to actually paint. And so for those two reasons, the issues of the single-family residents and the digitally printed murals kind of put a hamper on that process, because it's the actual painting of the mural on the wall that makes the youth feel more engaged in the process, like more so than just doing the design. You know, when they paint it, they own it, they did it, they don't want anybody to paint on it and tag on it. And like obviously from what I've heard, we're hearing different issues from different sides of the city, and I understand and respect that a lot of homeowners are not living in neighborhoods where this is common and they don't want to be living in a neighborhood like that. But isn't there a way where homeowners associations can have a pathway to make that decision themselves instead of just blocking it off to everybody? Because in a lot of communities like Boyle Heights, South Central, and Venice, and Watts, like those are kind of the only spaces that we have access to a lot of times. And this is like, you know, saving the lives of youth. You know what I mean? This is beyond just like painting something on a wall or anything like that. So please take that into consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Raul Gonzalez. Raul Gonzalez, our last speaker. Okay. I know this guy.
Hello. Thank you. The mic. Thank you, council members and Plum Committee and Cultural Affairs and Spark and MCLA and everybody right here, Noni, Yami.
You want the sign-in sheet?
Yeah. Pass it over.
All right. Okay.
Except for one person. I'm just playing. So, pretty much, I've been painting murals for close to 17 years now. I'm a native of East Los Angeles, Boyle Heights. Art saved my life. You know, a lot of people in the street that do murals, that paint with the youth, they interact with them. And that happened with me, with some of the muralists that I met over the years through programs like LA Conservation Corps and including city programs that are no longer funded. So I really want to focus more on getting the mural ordinance passed. 6 months is too short to register murals. I agree with what some of the speakers said. You know, it's not going to give you enough time. You're going to lose a lot of precious art, you know, a lot of history. Vintage mural fees should be free, like it should be waived. It should be free to grandfather the murals in, because they're bringing culture to the community. And the city of LA has been known for the murals. It brings tourism. And when you don't take care of your city, who wants to come and look at it? Another thing is the registration for the murals. The fee is, I think it's at $60. I think it should be waived for like the first year or so, just to get it back up. Now, there's ways that I guess maybe you could balance it out, where some monies that are supposed to go from billboard company fees to go into creation of public art. I got two more things. Single family homes. What Zara said. I'm not going to say it again. All right. So, and that we should actually try to get money invested into public art programs and restoration programs, because we could bring back a lot of good work. We're actually restoring the murals in the 101 freeway with MCLA, and you see the change. People are seeing the positive vibe that you get from seeing these murals come back. So, thank you. All right.
Thank you, Ron. You know, colleagues and audience, growing up in Cypress Park and Lincoln Heights, the murals were a very important part of my life, and I actually witnessed Mr. Healy painting that mural on Pasadena Avenue on Broadway I think I was a 7th grader. I guess I'm sorry, Wayne, I didn't mean to. Our elders. But it has that kind of significance for different parts of the city, and I think the whole city is concerned for our youth. I think the whole city is concerned for how we change our environment for the betterment and education of our youth. I think the whole city has that type of compassion and commitment. The question here is process. And so trying to fold in every perspective is a very, very challenging task when you have over 3 million people living in one space. And being able to collapse all of those points of view and perspectives and priorities is no easy feat. So again, my congratulations to you in having the tenacity and the patience to be here. As we ended our last conversation in committee, and I think we had a very healthy one, it was clear that we needed to look at how we embrace this positive energy and what Murals can do for the city. In light of some of the statements made, and if you allow me, colleagues, just to kind of go through some of the amendments and then we can react to them and move in that direction, I want to state the following, so I'm going to get off my soapbox and just try to get to the nitty-gritty of the amendments. The amendments I'd like to introduce, colleagues, is that we incorporate the recommended changes that noted in the Planning Department report dated January 4th, 2013, page 2. And I'll ask the staff to come in and talk about those amendments so we can address those issues. 2, amend the draft ordinance to delete the residential restriction where murals can first be located so that no restriction exists in a citywide baseline ordinance. Wait, before you clap. Amend the draft ordinance to add an instruction for the planning department to add or create a land use tool, an overlay zone of sorts. It could be a special use district, a specific plan, in the ordinance to allow council offices to add a residential restriction customized to meet the needs of the respective communities. So what that means is that there are communities out there in council districts that want to restrict murals on an R1 zone, they would have a tool to trigger that. And we would leave that to the local areas throughout the city if they choose to go there. But on a citywide basis, there would be no restrictions. So that would be part of the process. And I think Councilman Englander will have more to add to that, and when we get there, we'll do that. I think there's 7 amendments, so just bear with me. 3, amend the draft ordinance to add an instruction for the planning. Okay, I did that right. 4, instruct Department of Cultural Affairs to include, add a reference, even if duplicate in the administrative rules and the registration application that VARA, V-A-R-A, and CAPA, which are federal and state regulations, is to be upheld, and nothing in this ordinance is meant to remove compliance with them. So we're going to stay compliant with state and federal rules. To facilitate registration for existing exterior murals on private property already on the DCA database, instruct the Department of Cultural Affairs to provide notice to the entities for the murals and automatically process registration certificates. So those who are already on the list with Department of Cultural Affairs, they are automatically registered. So we are including them automatically. There's no fee, there's no charge, it's done because they're already there. Instruct the Department of Cultural Affairs in conjunction with Department of Building and Safety, planning to notify the artists, community, property owners, and with murals to the full extent possible, including through the Department of Cultural Affairs planning and Department of Building and Safety websites, newspapers, artists, networks, relative to the Vintage Mural Permit Amnesty Program. And we'll ask the staff to go through that amnesty program, what that means. They'll break it down for us. And 7, instruct Department of Cultural Affairs, Department of Building and Safety, with the assistance of planning, to inform the Department of Public Works Office of Community Beautification and other vandalism abatement agencies of the adopted ordinance and the VARA and the CAPA to safeguard against mural removals. So we need to coordinate within the city, let public, the folks in Public Works that has Office Community Beautification, sometimes they go in and they accidentally or uninformed, and they go ahead and they whitewash a mural, and because someone called it in as graffiti or something. So we need to register and make sure there's coordination with the city family in that regard. So colleagues, these are the 7 amendments that are in front of us. And I know there's more questions. I think the issue of vinyl versus mural is what was brought up. We have specifications on how the working definition of a digitally hand-rendered and printed mural will safeguard with all of these criteria, all this criteria and all these conditions, so that we're not creating this interchange between commercial vinyl advertisements with art. And so the criteria here is so stringent that we will be able to, keeping our fingers crossed, control the level of this interchangeability. And what struck me in the conversation, and I listened to both sides of the issue, is the element of how technology in the hands of youth, when they work with art that's developed by hand, and how that gets transferred and augmented through technology, is a bridge that is being created between the youth who are involved in technology and the youth who want to continue in the traditional mural art. Whether that's good or bad, right, wrong, it's a philosophical question, it seems to me. But it is a trend that seems to be at its upward swing as our youth become more exposed to technology, and as our technology advances, our ability to transfer this knowledge in this technology and embracing the God-given talents of our youth as they display that art with technology is a transition we're going through. How we will control that, if that's the right word, I'm not sure if we want to control it, but how do we adjust to those changes is something that policymakers will be responding to in the near future. With this criteria, I think they are so stringent that I think we're starting at a good place in terms of regulating and making sure it doesn't get abused. And if we see that it's getting abused, we have some very strong policymakers here that will be the first ones to respond to any loopholes that might come from this. But colleagues, you can see the working definition is laid out in bullets, and it's pretty thorough. But with that, I'll stop here and get the reactions of my colleagues and see how you want to continue with this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I want to thank the Plan Department and Department of Cultural Affairs and their commissions for helping us get to this point. And this is an issue that's been around for some time. And I just want to remind everyone, particularly those that mentioned, why do we even have to have an ordinance? And why should we even have regulations? Which is something I asked when I started looking at some of the murals in my district that existed, and the problems with us moving forward and putting up more. And we were told that there was a so-called moratorium, but it's because of some of the litigation that's going on with the sign industry. We have to have an ordinance. We have to have some regulations, because if we do not, we can't have any more murals go up, because we would be potentially challenged by the signage industry as to why we would allow murals to go up but not their own commercial signs. So it's just a reality that we live in today, given the way the case law has built up and where we are in the city of Los Angeles with respect to commercialized signs for profit. We have to have an ordinance and regulations that will allow murals to continue to go up in the city. And the good news is that we're here. The bad news is that it took us a long time to get here. And the bad news is that for a long time, we had this so-called, it was an official moratorium, but, murals just weren't allowed to go up. And we really didn't do anything about it for years until some council members and some community members said, wait a minute, let's do something. Let's allow the mural capital of this country to continue to put up more murals. And then we were also hear about, beautiful murals that were put up. For example, at Assumption School in Bow Heights put up a beautiful, colorful mural of kids reading and flowers and very colorful, and was put up primarily to keep graffiti away. And interestingly, there was a complaint about it, and the city had to go down, and so that we wouldn't be liable in terms of, the signage industry telling us, why do we allow this and not that, and et cetera. We actually worked something out that we would come up with an ordinance as quickly as possible, and this is where we are. And like Mr. Reyes, I too grew up around murals. I spent a lot of time in the Strata courts in Bow Heights. I've seen them around my neighborhood when I walked to the store and markets. And it was more of just an artistic expression for me to see that up in my neighborhood, but it was also educational. I would see figures up on the walls that I would ask questions about, who was Emiliano Zapata. And there was a lot of things I saw on walls that I wasn't necessarily learning in the school books at school. And so for a number of reasons already cited, the tourism dollars, the economic value of murals, the cultural expression that we're able to provide to our artists when they have a blank wall for them to express themselves, the beautification it provides, and yes, even the anti-graffiti ability that this provides. We have to move forward and do something quickly to make this possible. And I'm very happy with where we are. We've come a long way. At one time, there's a lot more artists who are opposed to this than there are now. But I think a lot of the artists that are out there have, one way or another, heard about this through the numerous outreach community meetings that we've had. And I think we've come a very long way to come up with something that's very workable. I think Mr. Reyes's amendments are very good. I think will help close that. Even after we adopt this ordinance, should we adopt it, move forward, see what happens. There'll be some things we need to change and improve upon. But one thing I do think we still need to change, and I'm going to put in a motion right now, is and something I put in a while back when we first started talking about this, was to ensure that instead of having the language about having to register existing murals and the loopholes and some of the unintended consequences that may provide by people not registering, it's just better to grandfather all murals existing at the date of the adoption of the new ordinance. So that will be a motion I will put in, and it's written here for our staff to see and have this put in by the time this reaches council. Okay, thank you.
After Councilman Englander speaks, I'd like to ask the staff and how that would, how we would respond to the process and documenting and enforcement. But Councilman Englander.
And before I make my comments and suggestions, on the last motion, I wasn't aware that was coming as well, but as well as some of the others. One of my concerns when staff addresses that issue, and I think it's coming from the heart, and it's from where the perspective is not just the enforcement issue, but what happens between now and then when the ordinance is actually in effect, because ordinances, I believe, take at least 30 days from the time, not that it comes to council or this body passes it, but from the time the mayor actually signs it. So it could be potentially another 6 weeks.
Council member, after the mayor, either for ordinances that are prepared, the mayor, once the ordinance is approved by council, the mayor has 10 days to act on the ordinance, and after the 10 days pass, the ordinance will be posted, and on the 41st day, the ordinance will be in effect.
Okay, thank you. So it's a minimum of 41 days, and that's not from today or not from the time that this body passes it then, but from the time that the council would actually vote on it. So it could be 60 days, realistically, could be more, depending on when that time frame occurred. So with that, what happens in that period if people put any murals up that didn't go through any of this process or the community vetting, what was outlined by cultural affairs? They have some concern, again, on that issue of grandfathering from the date, the time the ordinance takes effect. I think it creates some unintended consequences, but it comes from a good place. And so I appreciate the spirit of it, but I do think it creates some problems. First, before I get into any of my comments, I want to thank not only the artists for engaging in this and the community, but I also want to particularly thank one individual, and that's the chairman of this committee. We've just this last weekend, in fact, I spent quite a bit of time driving through his district, and we are a tale of two different cities, quite frankly, as we all know. And it's not something we can hide behind. It's something we need to celebrate. The fact that we are absolutely the most diverse place on earth, with so many block by block by block characteristics of culture and community, ethnicities, and it's something we need to cherish and protect at all cost, and create balances to ensure we have those protections in place. And I want to thank a lot of the stories that Chairman of our committee, Ed Reyes, shared in working through this process as well, but both growing up through this and the significance and the importance of why we need to have protections in place for muralists, how we have a process to allow them, at the same time creating a balance. One of the things that I had brought up last time is why not have the opportunity to have some type of overlay zone where communities can opt in to allow muralists and murals to take place with these conditions and that have been worked out with the stakeholders. And one of the comments that was made back by the chairman was many of these communities, in fact, don't have either the resources, opportunities, or they're not organized in that fashion, quite frankly, in the structure, to go through those kinds of processes while they're struggling in their own right just to buy materials and to organize the community and work with youth and all the other benefits that was discussed. And with the idea then of flipping that around, with looking at communities then perhaps where it's not a one-size-fits-all city of Los Angeles, as we all know. Not everything works everywhere. And when we try to create blanket legislation or regulations or processes, they may not all fit every community. And have the opportunity then for communities that feel strongly, perhaps, that some of the items or some of these restrictions or conditions either don't go far enough or go too far, have the opportunity to individually weigh in based on the characteristics of their neighborhood, for them to organize and do that, I think is a very wise process, and I applaud the leadership and vision of that. With that, I support and wholly support the ordinance and all the changes being recommended, with a couple of exceptions, if you will. And that would be on the outreach. Since it's 41 days, I would not accept the idea of grandfathering in just because of the issues that I brought up, that in 60 days anything can happen. And unfortunately, there are unintended consequences. And there are some folks that just won't say, okay, I'm going to wait and follow the rules. And it's not probably anybody in this room, quite frankly. In fact, I know it's not. And that's why you're all here, because you're weighing in on doing it right. And unfortunately, there are many others that, some that, the spoilers, if you will, that don't want to play well with others and follow any rules at all. So I think that could create some problems. And I think the chairman, him outlining the way and the opportunity for the registration makes sense. Although I do, again, give credit to Mr. Huizar for the spirit in which he was presenting it, because I think it's the right spirit and the right heart. In terms of the opting out part, I would ask, though, that this ordinance has a delay of implementation for one reason and one reason only. And the delay in implementation would be not that we would hold it up, or not that we wouldn't send it to council, or not that the council would in fact even hold it at council. The council could actually vote on it and send it forthwith to the mayor. But then, rather than it being in effect in 30 days, we would extend the effectiveness date beyond that for another 90 days. And that 90-day period then, once it's in effect, between that time would give ample opportunity for neighborhood councils to weigh in on their specific area and see if they wanted to create an overlay zone, as was suggested, where they either would outright prohibit or restrict any elements in their specific area. I don't know that a lot of neighborhood councils have had the opportunity to really vet this and look at it. This is something that's going to affect a lot of communities that, and again, most, I think, want it. And I don't think there would be a problem with many, but there may be a few that don't. And it would give them the opportunity. It takes a minimum of 60 days. As we just did this morning in City Council, we pushed off a big item, as you all know, on a street repair initiative, on a street bond, to allow neighborhood councils and stakeholders to weigh in and give it more time. And I think we apply that to and should apply that to as many citywide issues as possible, and this is one of those. So we would then allow neighborhood councils that chose to put it on their agenda and take it up and take up a position that if they wanted to create that overlay zone, they could ask their council member to submit a motion on their behalf, so it doesn't cost that community any money to do it either, and we can follow that process. And then for the ones that didn't, it wouldn't mean they couldn't do it at some time in the future, but that means that they probably either wouldn't, but at least it gives us that opportunity. So I would ask for that friendly amendment to be considered.
Comments on that?
Yeah, on that last one, I think it wouldn't be friendly, and we should take a vote, because I too would respectfully not, I wouldn't support that. I think that we have had numerous outreach meetings where some of the neighborhood councils have actually discussed it, the Mural ordinance. They've had their opportunities. I think the more proper way to go about, and I see your intent, what you're trying to get at, and usually when we do overlay zones is that the ordinance, the law is passed, and then we, some areas put in an overlay zone to either improve or change what the ordinance is. In this case, given how far we've come with this, I could see, you'd say the date of effective implementation would be how long? 90 days?
90 days.
Date certain?
Yeah, it's date certain. So
Date
it wouldn't
certain,
come back
okay.
to the city council, and in fact, if I could, on that, this is the first time that reverse overlay, I don't think we've ever done anything like that before.
Yeah.
And this is new to this conversation, and that would
So
allow...
the effective date of, okay, let me,
And let me ask this, if I could, if I can ask the chairman if he would allow that as a friendly amendment, since it was his motion.
I would allow that as a friendly amendment, because it is defining a period that allows for the law to take place. And the way
Mr. Chair, but this is an ordinance that has been proposed. We'd have to take a vote on that. I don't think it'd be a friendly to anything.
He asked my opinion, so I'm just giving my opinion. And Mr. City Attorney can help me with this. This is the concept. This is the intent is we would delete the residential restriction where murals can be located so that no restriction exists in the citywide baseline ordinance. That's our baseline.
Yes.
Okay, then we get this through the council. And we want to add those locations geographically based on this 90-day window that Councilman Englander is proposing. Well, within this 90-day window, entities throughout the city would say, we do or we don't want this exemption. We want to restrict. And let's say we
Okay.
get two or three locations that say within these boundaries in these streets, we do not want murals on R1 zones. We do not. Could we fold in those restrictions in the form of an overlay zone to be part of the ordinance once it takes effect in 90 days?
Well, okay, let me back up here. I think what I'm hearing from you is that you want to have a 60-day or a 90-day period so people can decide if they want to have this overlay zone or whatever we're going to call it, correct?
Take 90 days because neighborhood councils take a minimum of 60 days.
Okay.
Just to agendize it, perhaps send it to their subcommittees, bring it back to their board and take a position. So,
Okay.
asking for and oftentimes, in scheduling that for them, if we've missed their deadlines as well, they may ask for a speaker or more information, and so that's what affords them that time and opportunity, as we've heard from them on other issues.
Okay, well, one way that I'm thinking that we probably could do it, that would probably be the simplest, is if the council adopts this ordinance, just simply put in a delay in effect so that the new baseline, it wouldn't go into effect until 90 days. I mean, we could do that, and then during that time period, you get the word out, and then if people want to initiate some kind of overlays, I don't know what the planning department is going to call it, but whatever the vehicle is, then they can initiate those. And like you say, it would probably be at the most 2 or 3 areas of the city that would do that, and then they could independently go through the system. And then it would,
independent of the effective date. So they could decide, we're going to do an overlay zone, but it will not change the date.
Well,
right? Because the overlay zone procedure is going to take longer than 90 days.
Well, that's right. So you have to be careful to set the date 90 days or longer if you think realistically it's going to take longer for people to get these overlay zones through.
Here's my question. If there's any areas that have overlay zones, if there are any, and I don't know with certainty that there would be, but let's assume there are a couple of areas that might be. If those are submitted, if they're pending, is there a way to implement the ordinance for the rest of the city for the ones that haven't been or anything's been submitted?
You mean to amend the existing overlay ordinances? Is that what you're saying? I'm not quite understanding.
So in other words, if it were to take place in 90 days,
yes,
but before it went into effect,
yes,
there were a couple submitted with overlay zones with the prohibition or restrictions that we talked about. If that came forward, if those were pending and the overlay zones weren't yet approved or implemented,
yes,
is there a way, since those are pending, that the overall ordinance wouldn't be implemented in those areas until they're...
well, it would be really tricky to do that.
Is there a way to do that, though? Is there a mechanism?
You know what? I think that would be awfully difficult because you wouldn't know in what part of the city people were. I think it's better to adopt the baseline ordinance and then just give a sufficient amount of time and then say, warn people that you have to get it through the system within this time period. And if you don't, then there may be a period of time where the baseline is in effect in your area and you don't have the overlay in effect. I mean, that's the cleanest way to do it.
Do you think we can get the overlays if we had them done in the next, say, we had a period of 60 days for those folks to weigh in on it, and they were submitted prior to that date, and the ordinance was taking effect in 90 days? Would that be a sufficient amount of time, that 30-day window?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'd have to bring planning up here because, there's notice and hearing requirements, and I don't even know what...
Tom, why don't you come on up? Because what comes to mind, and we were just reminded, when we did the baseline mansionization, the baseline
Mansionization
right.
ordinance, yeah.
We we were able to protect certain areas within the city from these atrocious walls that were being built and
The retaining walls?
retaining walls that were just outrageous and creating public safety issues. Does that model help us in this instance in terms of approach? Because we're starting with the fact that no restriction will exist citywide for murals. But I'm trying to respond to the concerns raised by Councilman Englander that, and it's interesting because when we did the survey, those that were actually registered, we didn't see any murals in certain parts of the city.
Correct.
And in other parts, we saw a lot of murals. So it's obvious where they're accepted and where they're not. So that line is rather definitive if we were to go by what's registered. But we also want to give folks the opportunity to feel that they could define their own space by not allowing them because they don't want them. It's evident because they're not there, according to this list.
Right.
And that's correct. And with that, then, is there, to simplify the ask, if you will, is to say that neighborhood councils would have by a certain date certain, 60 days out from the time of passage by the council, to respond in their specific area, to take position or not. Would that be something reasonable?
Well, I hear what you're saying. I don't know if that would be enough time. I mean, I think what you're proposing is to allow every neighborhood council to recommend that they want to have their own specific plan. So because it's just changing the zoning code for their neighborhood. So you're saying that some neighborhood councils may want to ban murals outright.
Michael?
Actually, I might be able to provide a point of clarification. One way to look at it is if you have the more restrictive language apply per council district, and then we can opt out certain council districts, and then they could go back and we could further study with those council districts if they want to allow these, for example, on single-family homes. So say there's council district 16 that doesn't want to allow to have single-family homes have murals because they tend to have wooden garages that have windows that they like to keep available to be open. And so therefore we would go ahead and carve that council district out from having this provision to apply to certain parts of the city, but to have just the legislative process from the neighborhood council usually takes 60 days. For us, when we do like with fence height districts where you have overnight fence issues and we go into a neighborhood, we usually find that a majority of the people like them and a close to majority of people don't. And we can never usually get consensus when we have those types of public meetings, and it creates kind of a neighbor against environment because people don't understand what the current regulations are. So the amount of outreach to get consensus on that issue, they usually end up not coming to council because it just kind of unwinds in the community. So one way to attach it would be to look at maybe council districts and say which ones do we feel may want to have more protections in this ordinance and treat them a certain way than other districts that may have a more deeper understanding and appreciation for murals can have a different regulation. That might be one way to quickly address it, and then we can go back and fine-tune that if it turns out your constituents say, actually, we would like to have that same flexibility as Boyle Heights has in our neighborhood, and then we can go back and do a further study. Just one
So
suggestion.
that would be like the first cut in
Correct. We can
implementing
examine
the
certain
ordinance.
council districts.
And just, on the record, and I mean, that might be a good way to go, and figuring out how we get there if we take that direction. I just keep in mind, I mean, I'm not saying no murals in any specific areas. In fact, I'm working right now with the Museum of the San Fernando Valley, and they've been working with Northridge, two neighborhood councils, and we've just going down the path of approving the artists to do a walking tour of the historic elements of the valley and Northridge with murals. And we're far down the path of doing that, and the community so far that has embraced that. And so, but I do, the idea of doing that by council district, though, if that's an easier way to implement it, then we can always, we can always amend it once it comes in. So if we put restrictions in or not allowed certain things by districts, we can always come back in those specific districts to fine tune them. Okay.
Right. Okay, so we could move with these amendments with the understanding that, I guess as Chair, I would ask my colleagues if they are going to be part of the baseline of no restriction. And if they want to opt out of that, they can choose to do so. And we could identify those districts within the ordinance so we can get this off the ground as soon as possible. Would that be accurate? Okay.
Sounds good.
Now, just let me ask a procedural point here. Do you want this to go back to planning and have them, or do you want to just have them, give them this general direction and have them amend the ordinance, and then...
Let's get the language of who wants the restriction, who doesn't, and we'll get it to you before council.
Okay.
And that way, by the time it gets to council, it's already lined up. Are you comfortable with that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think you have to give me direction now, because this is a public meeting, so you need to give me direction now, and I don't
You
care
want me
what...
to tell you right now which council members do or don't?
Yes, exactly.
So here,
Right
can
now?
I make a recommendation?
Volley.
We could do that.
Well, we could do that, but what we could do is we could have the general concept, and then when it goes to the full council, explain it to them, and at that point, you know, they could discuss
And
it.
just for the record, I'm still going to vote against that, because we should be making planning policy based upon the planning procedures before us and not on political jurisdictions. I think it doesn't make good planning for the city if we keep opting in, opting out by council district. If we do that, and let's not take this issue, let's take another issue, and I say, well, shoot, I want my district out of it. I have very diverse communities from Eagle Rock to Boyle Heights to El Cerrito to downtown. That is not the best way to do planning for the city. My question is this: the proper way to effectuate the intent by Mr. Englander is this ordinance would pass. If a certain community doesn't like it, they could implement an overlay zone and say, we do not want murals in our residential areas. Is that correct?
That would be my recommendation, yes.
That is
They
the
could do it
proper
by
procedure.
their specific plans.
To go-
That's what our specific plans are intended to do.
That is the proper procedure. To do planning policy in the way we're doing it today will create problems for council members that have very diverse council districts.
Well, yes, point well taken. Plus, I need, as the city attorney, I need to have explicit direction from you today as to how you want me to prepare the final draft.
Then with that feeling, then there's...
I mean, you guys could do what I'm just telling you.
Going back,
you guys could move forward however you want.
Going back to the other opportunity of just extending the window, not the conversation, not the process, not keeping it committee, but the opportunity then to go to the neighborhood councils to get them weigh in on. Those are our eyes and ears in each of those communities. They were elected to serve in those communities. They've been around now for a decade. They deal with most local issues that are happening, and citywide issues as well, that are happening in their very communities. I think it behooves us to send this and particularly because of that statement that you made, that every community is very different. And rather than divide them, send this to them for them if they want to have that overlay. So we give them that window of opportunity. We could do one of two things. We could pass the ordinance and then have a waiting period for them to weigh in on if they wanted to have the restrictions in place or the overlay, or opt out, if you will. Or we can send it to council now, but hold it until that 60-day period before council votes for the overlays to come in, and then we wouldn't hold the implementation date. It would still be implemented within the 41 days. Either way works well.
No, and my contention, and have the planning department correct me if I'm wrong, both of those are unworkable, because in order for us to implement the overlay zones in those areas, it's going to take much longer than 60, 90 days. Is
That's
that
correct.
That's correct. So it's unworkable and will kill this ordinance.
So again, not having the opportunity to have them weigh in on if we're going to create some overlay, but not have the ability to have the overlay in effect, to me isn't very isn't rational in terms of implementing an ordinance that, again, is citywide, where a lot of folks have said, they wanted that opportunity to have some of those restrictions in place.
But we already had a number of outreach meetings, and this has been postponed for the sole purpose of getting more input from, particularly, and initially it was just the artist community was following this, and then it actually expanded to neighborhood councils, to community groups. I mean, we have delayed, at least since 2008, we've been discussing how we're going to lift this moratorium. Just discussing it. This has been in effect much
But I
longer.
think we've gotten there with now having the opportunity. We've had a lot of, in those discussions, in the outreach meetings, the feedback has also been from some communities, they want the opportunity for them to represent their own area as well and weigh in.
And there's a procedures to implement what they feel is right for their neighborhoods, and that is pass the ordinance, and then they should implement an overlay zone for their particular community. That is a proper procedure to do this.
I mean, you can bring it up. We can do it that way.
Again, just to reemphasize, we did not delay this because we wanted to. This was delayed because of legal issues, clarity from the courts, on and on and on. So I need to say that because I'm just as frustrated chairing this committee when this thing started back 10 years ago. So I just needed to say that. But anyway, got that off my chest. When you look at process, and I'm hearing both of my colleagues, I think we both want the best for the city. But we do want to see what's real in terms of implementation, because we deserve that. We've waited 10 years for this. Is your recommendation as our planning staff, professional, that we move to put forth this ordinance and allow for every council member to bring in these overlays after we state the baseline?
Well, yes, I would say that. I was actually just discussing with the city attorney, perhaps this might be a little more palatable. This is just sort of an idea that I was thinking about listening to this conversation, is maybe we get an ordinance adopted now, but however, we have a sunset clause for banning them on single-family homes. So maybe this could go forward with a 2-year ban on single-family homes until new ordinances new specific plans get adopted, and then after that, the ban would go away.
Well, I think that goes against the spirit of all the artists who've been involved in this for all these years.
Or it could be a 1 year or 6 months, but then at least, I don't know, I mean, we could end up having lots of specific plans popping up all over the city, and quite frankly, I don't think the planning department has the resources to start implementing and establishing specific plans all over that. I mean, we could amend existing specific plans to lower or raise the number of units allowed. We can also do it the converse, but if we start off with allowing murals on every single property, I don't know how much time that would take to get all of the neighborhoods, because I don't know how many neighborhoods there are out there.
But the facts and the lists of murals tells it gives us a very clear picture.
Yes.
There are parts of the city that just do not organically have murals. They just don't, for whatever reason. And there are other parts of the city where organically it is part of the spirit of the community.
I agree with what you're saying completely.
All we're trying to do is let the spirit live, right, within those areas.
But the process still has to create boundaries. We're still going to have to do outreach. We're still going to have to go through a legislative process like this for every one of these neighborhoods.
You suggested 2 years. Is it possible? Because we'd be able to pass an ordinance, keep the restriction in place, but then again have that restriction sunset, as you stated.
Have that restriction expire.
I don't know. Can we do that in a 6-month time frame? That way, they would still give us and afford us the opportunity to reach out those areas in that time. That way, we're not holding anything up, and we pass it all.
Pass an ordinance.
That restriction stays on, but then expires in 6 months. And in 6 months, then we have that opportunity, and it'll be up to each individual council member at that point to reach out to any of their neighborhood councils or the neighborhood councils that choose to take it up, to file any motions on their behalf for overlay zones or whatever that might be.
There's one factor here that, and player, actually, that hasn't been heard from is building and safety. And it's all about enforcement. So I know you're happy to come up to the microphone. But I need to hear, I mean, I'm watching your body language from the corner of my eye, and I want to make sure you're being heard, because when it does or doesn't happen, it's all going to go to you in terms of implementation and enforcement. Can you give us your reaction to what you've heard?
Good afternoon. Luke Zamperini, Chief Inspector, Building and Safety. Enforcement of murals has been a nightmare for building and safety ever since the ban was imposed. And we're looking for the most simple way to deal with the issue. It's been my experience in driving through the city and noticing where the murals are that first of all, the muralists, they'll tell you they don't just put them up because they want to put them up. They put them up because a property owner has invited them to put it on their property. Otherwise, it's considered graffiti. So the reason there are no murals in some parts of the cities is that the property owners just don't want them. And so that's kind of a natural bulwark against the spread of murals. And so in other neighborhoods where the property owners do want them, they flourish, whether we have laws that ban them or not. So I think there just might be a natural tendency for some neighborhoods to just not allow them in just by not commissioning the artists.
Okay. So if we were to delete the residential restriction, we essentially allow the freedom of each individual property to dictate whether they want the mural or not.
Yes. And if we ban in the residential areas, then we have an enforcement problem because there's Venice and there's Boyle Heights. There's places where they exist on single-family dwellings. And now we're stuck with which ones are we going to enforce on? And
then again, the idea of, I think the idea of allowing it, I'm okay with that. But having the opportunity for the communities to weigh in on whether those communities would allow it or not, it goes back to, it might be up to the individual property owner, and so far that has seemed to work in your view and perspective.
It has.
But in terms of communities, those were also, a lot of these have changed over the years, and we didn't have neighborhood councils until, again, 10 years ago. So relatively speaking, in the process, that's a new process as well. That might not mean that particular community. You're putting then neighbor against neighbor. If an individual wants it on their individual property, that might be one thing, or they want it or don't want it. And so that's one of the reasons for having some structure to this as well. And so the idea then, if you could weigh in on the thought of lifting that restriction, so we would allow them on single-family dwellings, but not do so. And what the conversation is that's taking place is perhaps for 6 months, and then that would expire to allow planning to then have the opportunity to review and have the time for neighborhood councils to submit, and working with their council offices, any prohibitions or overlay zones. You can weigh in on that.
Well, the overlay zones are essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're going to be specific plans, right? They cost a lot of money and take a lot of time to implement. Well, yeah, but that's where we have to enforce what the zoning code. It's not just the building codes that we enforce. So once again, if we have a prohibition on single-family dwellings having murals, and they are on single-family dwellings throughout the city, then there are whole neighborhoods that would be that would have illegal murals. And what we're trying to do is to try to get away from outlawing the murals.
He's got a fan club.
Thank you again. It would be very difficult for building and safety, because that makes the building inspector have to go out and determine which neighborhoods he's going to enforce it, and that's selective enforcement. So I think we need to go across the board, have a baseline ordinance, and then the communities that do not want to have them, and it's been my observation that these communities that don't have them are the wealthier communities in the city. They have the wherewithal to begin the process of instituting specific plans to keep them out.
I was going to say, take the applause when you can, because enforcers in the city rarely get applause.
I know, I'm quite surprised.
Okay. Just listening to our folks who implement, our building and safety officials who've been going through this for 10 years now, and listening to planning, I wanted to absorb Councilman Englander's concern in having the neighborhood councils be part of the areas that probably would be more restrictive in how they want to use their R1 zones. I'm real confident, quite frankly, in deleting the residential restriction where murals can be located. I think that's the direction we should take, Councilmember. But I want to be able to work with you to figure out how we can address your concerns. And I'm not sure we're going to get that right now. What I'd like to do is continue working with you between now and council, see if there's something we can come up with. But in the meantime, move in this direction where we have this citywide baseline ordinance. We delete the residential restriction where murals can first be located.
If we went back, if we're still going to consider the friendly amendment and vote on that and continue working in good faith, I'm happy to do that, with the idea that if we have to eliminate that at council, we can have that discussion, but that will ensure we can come up with a process where the ordinance then originally, as we discussed, wouldn't be implemented for that period of time to allow neighborhood councils to weigh in on it, which I think is critically important. And as we said, there are areas that welcome them and enjoy them and want them, and there are areas that simply don't. And I think we have to respect that. This is a little different than having a citywide ordinance that works in every community. This one doesn't, and we should, and we've got to do everything we can to preserve and protect and allow them where people want them, and we've got to also recognize and protect the areas that don't. And so that's just a matter of what we were elected to do. And with that, and having the idea that we should reach out more to neighborhood councils and ask them to weigh in on this. I think the fact that we have not ever formally asked them to take a formal position on this, on a citywide blanket policy, is, and we've heard every indication from them on another issue this morning, that that's the direction we took and we should take. We've done it on other planning issues as well, and I think we should do it on this one. If we don't have the opportunity and built into that time frame to do it, what I've suggested is a timeline to allow it. And then, so I would accept this if we moved it on with that time frame and between now and council. So in other words, it would be, council could vote on it, it could be implemented in 90 days after that instead of the 41 days, and allow neighborhood councils to take a position.
Well, let me ask this, because I'm not sure how well known it is. Did the neighborhood councils participate in this discussion throughout the process? Because that's what's important to Councilman Englander, to make sure that neighborhood councils did participate in the discussion throughout this process. If they did, do you recall, I don't expect you to pull out a sign-in sheet with all the different neighborhood councils, but can you give us a sense of what was the level of participation by neighborhood councils?
Well, certainly they've been notified of every public hearing along the way, so that's an easy answer. And I know that we've held a dozen workshops all over the city about a year ago. I know for a fact, I just was at the consortium of neighborhood councils this Saturday, and I spoke specifically on this topic. I can't name how many councils were there, but there were several dozen representatives from different neighborhood councils all over the city, and I did bring up this exact issue of the mural ordinance is going to Plum on Tuesday. Please show up. I know a big issue there will be where we should allow murals to go up. And I know Mr. Johnson's here from Studio City. I think there's a few other neighborhood council folks here, but they have been apprised, and every time we do go out to our groups that are collectives of neighborhood councils, we update them on all of our ordinances. So I've been out there.
Do we know how many neighborhood councils have taken positions on this, either in support or opposed? Do we have a record of that? Because there's nothing in the file that I've seen.
There's not much. I have the folder. I don't know. Maybe actually Tanner may know. I don't have a very long list. I have not gotten letters.
And that's my concern, that they may have had a representative, but it wasn't either the right representative or their planning and land use representative. And they haven't agendized it on their own. And so that would allow them that opportunity if they chose to do it. And it would still allow the implementation I don't see any, that's a small delay, and it's only delaying the implementation, not a vote. I think it's reasonable.
Okay, so we're talking about 90 days, that's what you're asking? Okay, and in 90 days, we would implement the citywide baseline ordinance. And that would allow us to continue moving forward. So 90 days compared to 10 years is what's in front of me.
And in that 90 days, we would then ask neighborhood councils. I certainly would. I don't know how any other council members would do it. For my own neighborhood councils, to ask if they wanted me to submit a motion or not on their behalf.
Well, I can assure you that when I go out to the neighborhood council groups on the monthly basis, I will remind them this is not going to be adopted by the full council until the city attorney drafts the ordinance. So this is going to be a few more months until we get adopted ordinance, and I'll make sure that all the neighborhood councils are notified that we are doing this, and that maybe it's a little long, so I know that people get a lot of language in here. I will go right to the most important issue here, which is the number of units. And
I mean, I could support that, where we're asking neighborhood councils to give their input on an ordinance that will take effect in 90 days. But what I'm saying is that if we're asking that we're going to implement an overlay zone within those 90 days, it's going to deem this whole ordinance unworkable, because that's not workable.
And again, I've suggested that we give them the time for us to put motions in that time period.
That makes sense.
And then we'll look at, in between now and then, we can look at what other vehicles or tools we have where those neighborhood councils, and again, that's if there are any, might be pending because we've submitted motions on their behalf, and we can hold up any implementation in those areas if need be. We can explore that at another opportunity.
Okay, bottom line is I don't want to delay this ordinance any more than we have to. I really don't. But if the 90 days allows us to let everybody know that this is going to be citywide, because that's what the ordinance is going to dictate, it gives respective council districts the ability to react and respond. Then you have a whole other track of work that will occur because they are not being allowed in the R1 zones in those specific areas. Are we good with that? Are we okay with that?
Give notice, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. It's not a kumbaya moment, but it's a great one. So can we do this? Can we move forward like this?
Okay, so City Attorney again. So to summarize, you're going to move all of the recommendations that you stated before, Chairman, and then the only addition you're going to have is you would like the City Attorney to draft the ordinance so that it would not go into effect until 90 days after passage by the full City Council?
Is that what I'm saying, guys?
Yes. I think
okay.
so.
Yes. All right. So we will instruct the city attorney to prepare the city attorney ordinance subject to the following amendments, which you've just stated, with the caveat that we have the 90 days, and we will implement at the end of those 90 days.
Yes. All right, City Clerk, is that, are you clear enough on that? It's all that he read into the record earlier, and he just wants the 90-day window period so that they can get the word out about the ordinance.
If they could trigger, if you want to trigger that?
I wanted to make sure that one of the recommendations that was made is also part of that, that the chairman made, was to have the opportunity to have overlay zones in areas for this particular ordinance.
Okay.
That was part of the original
Okay,
recommendation.
but
I wanted to ensure
that
it's still
cannot
in there.
delay the process.
Well,
'cause-
no, it won't. I'll give some thought to that. We, just so that you know, when the council adopted the baseline mansionization ordinance, that created what the planning department saw as minimum protections citywide.
Right.
And then it also authorized the later adoption of, SUDs for smaller areas that wanted more protection. So I believe at least one of those has been adopted, and there may be one or two more. So it would be something similar to that.
Okay, everybody's nodding yes. All right, folks, that's the other direction of this committee, and congratulations to you all, and again, thank you for your patience. Thank you. Okay. Oh, shoot. Okay. That's, item number 8 is next.
Yeah, yes, it did.
What?
Yes, it did.
Say what?
The amendment on the grandfathering, that was in there, right?
Yes, okay.
I gotta head out.
Okay, on the grandfathering, okay. Tom? On the grandfathering of that, I think the grandfather question was still out there.
That wasn't part of the original recommendation, or something?
Yeah, that was part of the motion, was to the
Okay.
grandfathering of the ordinance of existing murals at the time of the adoption.
Correct, and we recommended that we do not include that in the changes.
But I made that motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Well, there's a
Okay.
motion, but that we wanted to learn about, or at least understand what it meant by what it meant in terms of implementation, right?
Yeah.
Well,
that was the question that wasn't answered.
The 6-month period of amnesty was in no means an attempt to ban murals or to rid murals, but we needed to have a practical way of tracking them. Currently, Cultural Affairs does have a database that lists all of the murals that are registered. Right now, they have about 350. But in order for building and safety to go out and regulate, they need to have if they get called for to issue a citation for an illegal mural, they need to know whether that mural is registered or not.
But why don't we...
After 6 months, it certainly doesn't mean...
We don't need the explanation, Mr. Chair. I was under the impression that was wrapped up in the amendments you made, but I made that motion. If there's no second, there's no second. But
Right.
I want to acknowledge whether there wasn't whether there was
I
a second.
don't think there was a second.
There was not a second on that. Okay.
Okay, so we can raise this.
Did you-
Yeah, it's just procedurally, I'm a bit upset at this because I thought you acknowledged when I made that motion that we will get that in the ordinance when it comes to council, and that our staff will look at that in terms of the actual implementation. But that's fine. If there's no second, there is no second.
But by no means would it mean that even after the 6 months, muralists and property owners could certainly still register their mural. It just creates a cutoff time for where building and safety can go out and look at what is and is not an illegal mural. Within 6 months, there will be no citations given, but we need to have a period of time where all murals get on the database.
Yes, but you see, you are putting the burden on these people to come in and register, and there's going to be a lot more of these murals who are deemed illegal because the burden is upon them, and that's something we do not want to happen. It is easier for us to say they have been grandfathered in. If they haven't been cited up until this time, if we haven't enforced up until this time, something must be okay. And so just let them be now. But the way you're creating this framework, is that there are going to be hundreds of murals who are deemed illegal now. It's not only going to create more bureaucratic mess for us because we don't even have the enforcement to go out there. Councilmember Reyes just talked about how building and safety is overwhelmed. And it is a much smoother process if we just start from scratch by grandfathering instead of starting another 2-tier program, legal and illegal.
So Councilmember, if we grandfather them all, how do we define their grandfather status?
If people could come and show whether it's an artist, some verbal history, a newspaper, we do this all the time when we don't have proper records, a newspaper article, anything to show that this thing went up before the date of this ordinance was adopted. We could come up with a number of things, and it's boilerplate language that we use in a number of other areas where we can't come up with a date certain and we have very limited records.
Okay, so I'm a little leery about the procedure of this committee because we have one councilman that left, but the assumption that we would not.
Yeah, I mean, you've already taken the action.
Well, I'd like to motion to reconsider if the chair is so inclined to change his vote. I'd like to consider the item.
Procedurally, can I do that?
Well, but Councilman Englander is not here anymore, so.
That is a matter of each council member's decision, whether they are present or not present. I could go back to all my council meetings last year and say, I'm sorry, retake your votes, I wasn't there. Come on, you know that's not an accurate assessment.
Okay, let's do this. What I'd like to be able to do is provide a process by which we can, in fact, allow us to accept the murals that are out there. Grandfathering without some kind of process is going to make it hard for us to implement. So, do we have a mechanism? And I just heard a couple of suggestions from the council member here. Can we use that as a method by which we can make that assessment? And building and safety should be part of this because you're going to have to review the material and make a decision, right? Because you're out in the field.
We would have to know where all the murals are that have been grandfathered. There'd be no way to know that they have been grandfathered without them being in some sort of database, which is the purpose of registering them. So let's say 2-3 years down the line, somebody calls and complains about a mural, and if there's no cultural affairs database for us to refer to, we go out there and we just see a mural and go, well, you know what, you have to do something with it. It just can't be
Let's
there.
look at the other way. If somebody complains about a mural, you would come in and then you say, hey, we're going to have to cite you. And they say, no, we were grandfathered in. Let me show you why or how. And we could have a set of criteria that they can use as to why it shows they were up before that date.
That places the burden of deciding whether it's art on the building inspector. The building inspector is a retired construction worker.
Art is already defined in the ordinance.
Well, I'm much more comfortable with the Department of Cultural Affairs telling us which one is art and which one is advertising.
You just described it earlier. You know, you made the differentiation between graffiti and what is not. And the question here is not about what is art and what isn't art. The question here is, whatever murals, as we're seeing them and defining them in this ordinance, and you're correct, who do we place the burden on? Do we place it on the artist, or do we place it on the city? I think if we place it on the artist, you're going to be busier because you're going to have to go out there a whole lot more and figure out which ones are registered and which ones are not registered.
Well, if we have a registry of known murals and someone calls and complains about a mural, we can look at that registry and not have to go out there at all if it's registered. Yeah. We will never impact that property owner or the artist that painted the mural. If we don't have a registry, then we have to go out there and try to decide, was this thing painted before a certain date or not? And, it becomes pretty burdensome on, I have 2 sign inspectors for the entire city. That's 468 square miles of 1.4 million buildings and untold thousands and thousands of signs out there. So,
but it'll become, in your view, if it's more burdensome, that's okay with me because I'd rather protect a whole lot more murals, even if it's more work for us.
I'm with you, council member. I'd like to protect the murals too. But the whole issue and reason why there was a ban in the first place is because they were being encroached upon by commercial advertisers. In drawing the line against the illegal super graphic signs that were proliferating across the city, the then city council found it necessary to ban murals because the line was not finally, it wasn't defined enough.
No, but this ordinance is providing that for us. So you just have to do two things. One is, does it fall within the definition of the mural as defined under the new ordinance? Answer that question, yes or no. If no, okay, you could still fine them because it's commercial speech. If yes, if it falls into this definition, then you go to the second question. Was it up before this ordinance was implemented, the effective date of this ordinance? It's two questions.
And how would we know that?
That's it. We have, the County Hall of Administration has a number of ways they look at when they lack documents to figure out somebody's birth, or say, were they alive before this date or not date. There's certain things we could come up with, like criteria, right? Do anything. Did it come out of the Belvedere Citizen that they applauded this mural going up? Any evidence to determine that?
You know, how do you document the undocumented? I mean, if there's no documentation that there's a mural there, how are we going to know that it was there?
If there's no document, then it wasn't.
Then
It's
we're
illegal.
going to have to search the LA Times database and look for photographs.
The burden would be on the person to show you.
Well, what's the difference between them showing cultural affairs and getting it registered? I mean, it's all that does is that provides protection for the mural.
No, you're missing the point, sir, because...
I guess I am. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're missing the point. You're planning to change your vote, sir, I would reconsider. If not, I would just leave it as it is and fight that battle in council.
Can the registration, let me ask you, Councilmember, does the registration with Cultural Affairs and having Building and Safety refer to Cultural Affairs have the same result?
No. In my view, people who are not aware of this ordinance, are not aware that they have to register their murals, all of a sudden, there's going to be a number of murals that are deemed illegal because they were not registered.
So,
on the other hand, all of them are now legal if, in fact, they have proof that they were up before the effective date of the ordinance.
So let me ask you, if a building and safety inspector, one of the two, comes upon a mural and that owner shows the inspector evidence that this mural was put together before the ordinance date, could that suffice? And not have to burden the inspector to go through all this research? Is that something you could live with?
Well, certainly, what evidence that could be presented, but sometimes it's just, well, you know, hey, it's been here for 20 years. It's like, well, do you have a picture of it 20 years ago?
But if I'm hearing Councilmember Weezar correctly, then if that person cannot prove it, then it's deemed illegal.
For us to be able to determine that it was an illegal mural under this scenario, we would have to determine when it was put up, and I don't think we have the
But that's
the ability to forensically look at the mural.
I'm reinforcing that.
Sir, we make the laws, okay?
Yes, sir.
We make the laws. If we tell you could take 5 different documents to determine whether it was made before that time or not, just follow those rules, okay?
It's fine.
Period.
You're the policymaker, and we'll enforce whatever you decide to pass. I mean, I'm just letting you know what the difficulties are for us. And our concept was that by registering with Cultural Affairs, Building and Safety was really not involved with the mural at all. If it's registered with them, it's fine. We don't have anything to do with it.
And that's much easier to do. I believe me, I understand. Much easier to do. But I think it's worth the trouble to give us more work when we save more murals by grandfathering.
Okay. Councilman Weezar, if we extended the timeline, does that add any comfort to your position in making sure we take care of the murals
Extend the timeline how, sir?
for their registration?
No, that's no.
Okay.
That's not the answer. It's just
Okay, I just
it's
wanted
about
to-
who we're placing the burden on. And yes, if we place the burden on us, it's more work. But
All right.
I acknowledge that.
Okay. So I will second that motion. But I do want us to come up with, and hopefully your office can come up with some standards that allows building and safety to make a decision.
We will work closely with building and safety, this fine young gentleman up here, to come up with criteria that make sense for building and safety, to determine how we can determine whether a mural is up before the effective date of this ordinance.
And we'll continue talking about that too. Okay, and we'll be supportive. All right, so we'll move this forward then.
Mr. Chair, just to make sure that it's perfectly clear for the public record, so this item was reconsidered just now, and the vote was to approve as amended, include all the amendments, including the amendment introduced by Councilmember Weezer, and I shall read that aloud, is to instruct the city attorney to amend the draft ordinance to clarify in the municipal code section 14.4.20, section 5 of the draft, that all vintage art murals created prior to the date of adoption of the ordinance are not considered signs, whether registered or not, and to clarify provisions as necessary for vintage art murals in the proposed Los Angeles Administrative Code Section 22.119, Section 8 of the draft.
You comfortable with that?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Sausage is pretty messy. All right, folks, item number 8. So let's get the report from item number 8, and thank you for your patience.
Good evening. Nicholas Brown, Associate Zoning Administrator. It was only about a year ago that I was before this committee for the same matter. In that case, it was the determination that I made to impose conditions on the Blue Moon. What was appealed was the imposition of those conditions, and that was done by Eduardo Hernandez, the operator at that time. You did upheld the decision of the zoning administrator because after reading the report as well as the oral testimony from LAPD and aggrieved parties, you came to your own conclusion that it was a public nuisance. Similar to all revocation cases, we are required by code to put in an approval of plans review, and this one had that, and it had to come back in 6 months for an approval of plans review. When it came back for a review, we learned that the original operator, Mr. Hernandez, no longer had possession of the property and it returned to the bank. We also learned that no conditions were found in compliance, no verification of information was submitted, and we also did not have a tenant in front of us to discuss how we could tailor the existing conditions to the new tenant. What I did in the determination was to modify the approval of plans review to take into consideration that the bank was looking for a tenant. So what I did was to say that if you have a tenant, you come back in 6 months for a review. If you don't have one, come back in 18 months to give them that flexibility. But also in reading on page 26 of the determination, you'll see that there was discussion that our Office of Zoning Administration will work very closely with the bank as well as with any potential tenant to help them understand the process and to quickly get them through the approval of plans review so that they can have conditions drafted and crafted and tailored just for their use. If you were to approve the appeal that is before you, there's going to be two things that happen. One is that we will not have cost recovery. The city has already spent $30,000 in this process. So if you grant the approval, we will end up having to take that cost. The other is that if you grant the approval, is that we will not have any control, no authority over any uses, even though they may be similar to the one that we just got rid of. But if you grant the approval, we will not have that authority to review that case. That concludes my presentation. If you have no questions at this time, I can take that at later time.
No, thank you for that presentation. We will go into public comment, and there's a large contingency of folks from the Ha Ha Comedy Club. And
Councilman, what about the appellant in this case?
yes, well, we'll go there. You're right. Sorry, we're a little rusty. So let's go to the appellant. And who is the appellant?
It's the Community Commerce Bank.
Can we have them come forward?
Thank you, Chairman and the council members. And I'll make sure I finish it fast. I will respect the light. My name is Jack, and my wife and I and the family own a Ha Ha Cafe Comedy Club in the NoHo Arts District for the past 25 years.
I'm sorry, can I trouble you for your full name?
Jack, J-A-C-K, last name A-S-S-A-D-O-U-R-I-A-N.
Thank you.
And my wife and I and the family own the business since the beginning of NoHo Arts Districts, 1988. We've been operating it as a family. I understand the Blue Moon conditions. I've driven by there many times, and I've witnessed many things that I didn't approve of. Knowingly, I took this challenge to take this opportunity and to improve, turn all the negative concerns of the neighborhood and turn into a positive by bringing smiles and laughter to the community is what I want to do. I will cooperate and comply with all the conditions, but please take into consideration and help to modify a few concerns that I listed in order to be able to stay in business. I'd like to pass this along. The list is a few items that I like to take into consideration in order to be able to stay in business in today's economy. Basically, I want to bring happiness to the neighborhood. I understand everybody was upset about this particular location. I've already done a lot of improvements there. First improvement will be is that I got rid of 100 speakers out of the facility myself, threw it in the trash. I have pictures, I could show it. I took it personally to the dumpster. I got rid of their stage, dance floor, all their equipment, and added a beautiful kitchen where I would be serving food along with alcohol, not just alcohol. A new bright ambiance that I like to bring to the community, and I like the support. Thank you for your support, and God bless this great city of Los Angeles.
Okay.
The bank has now sold the property, and these are the new owners. So I don't know if their appeal is transferable or not.
Can someone help me out with that?
I closed escrow last year, December 31st. I am the legal owner of this property now, and I intend to move and expand basically into the NoHo Arts District. I'm no longer Blue Moon. Blue Moon isn't here, so it's the Ha Ha Cafe Comedy Club.
Okay. Nick, can you come on? Mr. Brown?
City Attorney here. The question has been asked of me. Apparently, these are new owners of the property.
Right.
And they were not the ones that filed the appeal originally. So I think legally, they can take over the appeal. It's up to planning as to what they want to do what their policy is on this.
Okay.
But I don't think there would be a legal impediment.
I guess to me is this notion of accountability. Like who's accountable for all of what I read here with the from LAPD, some real issues that are impacting the local neighborhood.
The conditions that you see in front of you were prepared not only after several hours of conducting a public hearing, but many days of actually writing the conditions and the necessary findings. To come today and to modify those conditions right on the coattail of the bank's appeal, I think is not appropriate. Rather, you should take your action to uphold the decision, and the now owner should come back for an approval of plans review. As stated on page 26 of the determination, the Office of Administration will do everything we can to make it as expedient of a process as possible, but that is the process.
Okay. So, for the record, those incidents that start back to December 23rd, 2011, all through 2012, who was managing the facility?
Eduardo Hernandez.
And that was with the bank, who was then assuming ownership?
And the bank had a loan on the property. Since Mr. Hernandez did not pay the bank took the property over and now has a new tenant, and that's the individual that just spoke a moment ago.
Okay. Before we go into any further public comment, because I think I'm going to hear more about how great this club is, I'd like to hear from the council office so that they can give us a perspective on how they want to treat the neighborhoods they represent. So,
Honorable Chair, Councilmember, I'm Carl Tarosian, Planning Deputy for Councilmember Paul Kokorian. We inherited this property from Council District 4, and the horror stories we've heard and the horror stories we've actually witnessed during the time it used to be Blue Moon, it's something that's not acceptable in any of our communities, especially immediately adjacent to a residential use. That being stated, we have LAPD here that has more of the details for that also of what was happening at the property. Haha Cafe is currently in the NoHo Arts area. They are a good club, except I don't think it's appropriate today here without having a public meeting where the community that lives around that facility that had to deal with Blue Moon doesn't have an opportunity to speak and to hear the conditions and to help shape the conditions. So therefore, the council office would like the appeal to be denied, the zoning administrator conditions to be upheld, and then a new plan approval be conducted. Our office will happily work with Haha Cafe and also the immediate and adjacent neighbors to come to conditions that are appropriate for the site that Haha Cafe can operate under.
So Haha exists, but not here at the moment. They
Correct.
existed somewhere else, and they are a future tenant.
Correct.
Okay. So we're in a gray area here.
Correct.
All right. Just want to put in a context. So let's hear from our officers. Make sure everybody has their moment at the public hearing process so we can fulfill our commitment here as a committee, and then we'll go from there. Sir.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Rob Benavides. I'm the senior lead officer for the area, that part of the NoHo Arts area. And to speak back on what the issues were with Blue Moon Nights, it was absolutely a nuisance. There was no question about it. It was determined it was a nuisance. Conditions were imposed on the property because of the lack of response from Mr. Hernandez and so forth, and those conditions were implemented. Moving forward, after the foreclosure and eviction of Mr. Hernandez, I think some issues here are really procedural more than anything, because we're talking about two different things: Blue Moon Nights, which was a nuisance, and Mr. Dorian, who owns Haha Cafe, which is 3 blocks north on Lancashire. Similar kind of demographic with it's on Lancashire with residential to the rear, apartments and such. Similar demographic. And now we're talking about a move 3 blocks south. And I think, again, we're talking about stuff that's procedural. The 8 years I've been a senior lead in that area, and I've been in North Hollywood since '97, Haha Cafe, Haha Club has not been a nuisance. It hasn't been a complaint. I don't have one complaint. But we were talking about moving locations. What do we do for going forward to ensure the confidence of the community on Kling, Blakes, Lancashire, the area surrounding Blue Moon Nights, I think, is the big issue here, and how we go forward with that to build confidence that, is this going to be a reputable business, or the concerns are we going to have more of the same nuisance activity? as a senior lead, I have confidence in him as a business owner where he's at right now, but I think the concerns are community confidence around where we're at.
Great. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that.
You're
Thank you for your great service. We also have Officer Cindy Schreiner would like to come on up. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Cindy Schreiner, Los Angeles Police Department, assigned to the Detective and Vice Division. Basically, this location, the prior owner, Blue Moon, came to us from North Hollywood Division back in 2009. The illegal activity, the nuisance activity became overwhelming, and they requested our assistance. Through that process, we ended up entering with the zoning and the city attorneys, and we went through the red light abatement process where all those conditions were implemented to the specific and very tailored to the area as well as the property and the business because of the citizens and the community members. So although there is a new business that has just purchased this area, property, they are very similar in some senses, but I can't judge him without having seen how he conducts a business in that specific area. We do not have any type of information except for from my senior lead, who has stated that he has been an outstanding community and business member, and we are all for positive businesses in the area, but I can't speak on his behalf in this specific business that he has purchased. So we are opposing the appeal and would like to do, as Mr. Brown said, set approval, have these reviewed in 6 months to a year, and see as to we can tailor these specific to his business, being comedy versus nightclub. So
I want to make sure we identify all the mitigation that could be based on their performance. Okay.
yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have one person, I think it says the community, Robert. Yeah, I don't want to mispronounce your last name. Is it Yaffe? Yaffe? Okay.
Well, it's only gentlemen, it seems like today, and of course our constituents. I'm the former president of the Chamber of Commerce of North Hollywood Universal, 92. Also, I'm a retired deputy from LA County, and I did serve as an executive board member of LAPD. Jack's facility, the Ha Ha Club, is not a nightclub whatsoever. I've been with him many times. We're talking about laughter comedy. Has no way at all connected with a nightclub of wild, risque activity. It's strictly family-oriented activity, food that's amazing. I have to admit, I did enjoy the food at his place, the Ha Ha Cafe. And when the officer made the statement that, well, we're dealing with the facility that he's looking to purchase, what about his actions there? Well, we can't assume that he's going to go awry. He already has an establishment, 25 years to our community. That's enough to say, yes, he has contributed a great deal of laughter and fun and no problems whatsoever. He's just going to carry on the legacy 3 blocks away. So to tell this gentleman, well, we're afraid possibly you might go awry, that's a misnomer, and that's totally disrespect to our business, especially with today's economy. The man is a future legacy and investing a fortune. Imagine you folks investing $750,000. This is his own hard blood money that he's invested in this community to make it better. And this sector of North Hollywood is the more lesser attractive area that he's going to improve greatly. And if you all take a trip down there, you'll see what I'm saying. The more activity is taking place at Magnolia and Lancashire versus where he is.
Okay. Well said. All right. Well, I have a big stack of Ha Ha Club Cafe, and I'm assuming you're all part of the act. No, just kidding. But we have a Garabe Muradian. Would you like to speak? Can I call your names in support?
Hello, my name is Garbet Muradian.
Okay.
I'm a friend of Jack for 25 years across from his Ha Ha Cafe Comedy Club. I work for Simply Discount Furniture. I manage this show, so I'd like to help my friend any way I can.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And I want to respect the fact that you've been sitting there all afternoon and made it through the cold and found parking and actually made yourself here. But can I read your names out loud and just stand and say you support, or would you like to speak? because it's a pretty big stack. You'd like to speak? All right, here we go. I tried. Okay, Josh. One person, can one person speak for everybody? Is that possible? Not that I want to cut you guys out, but it's...
Yeah, well, these are all comedians, sir, so it would be a 45-minute each set, so thank you guys for your time.
We could use a laugh. But
yeah, I know, that's why I was going to try to come over and do it, but thank you guys for your time. My name is Vincent Oshana. I've been a stand-up comedian. I left the military, and I started doing stand-up comedy. I've been doing it for about 10 years. What I think people miss is that the Haha is 3 blocks down the street. The Blue Moon, which I don't think nobody addressed, that I know of from experience, was an after-hour nightclub that was probably the worst atmosphere, interior, and it wasn't regular hours. It was when people left the club, they would come to this place at 2 o'clock in the morning till I would drive by at 8 o'clock because sometimes I would help at the Haha, and people would be outside, and they're all, they were doing drugs and doing a bunch of stuff. So this place is literally going, 3 blocks down the street, and if 25 years they've been doing this, I don't see anything going bad that hasn't happened already.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so let me, you guys, okay. Give us your name.
Rich Aronovich. I live in the area. I live at Tahunga and Magnolia. I'm just want to express to you, I've been doing comedy for over 15 years, and the atmosphere that they express is that they want a clean type of show, which is to express to you that they're not looking for any kind of rowdy atmosphere. Also, these are hour-and-a-half shows, and if someone is too rowdy or drunk, they remove them because it disrupts the show. So it's actually counterintuitive to what was going on before. And the last thing I want to say is that I will not be painting a mural anywhere on the building. So we can be assured of that. Thank you very much.
Okay, go. All right, go ahead.
How you doing? My name is Sean Kerrigan. I've lived in the Los Angeles community for 12 years now. I've made a living as an actor in TV, film, and commercials for the last 10 years. For the last 5 years, I've been doing stand-up, and that's when I became acquainted with Jack and the Ha Ha Comedy Club and Terry. The one thing I can say is that just like a lot of these comedians will tell you, there's a reason we have 2 drink minimums in a comedy club. Okay, and I know that there's a concern for loud and ruckus behavior, but there's a reason we have the 2 drink minimum is because a lot of times people are a little bit too cheap to pay for their dates, and so they want to like a cheap night out at a comedy club and laugh a little bit, and that's all it is. It's just a place for people to bring their date on an affordable night, and have a couple drinks and go on about their night with some laughter and get away from their crappy days, man. So anyways, thanks a lot. My name's Sean Kerrigan. Keep rocking.
All right, thanks.
Hello, my name is Augustino Zoida. I work with the Ha Ha Comedy Club and the Acidorians. I'm also a comedian, and actually when I was, one of the conditions that is on the club now, by moving, we have inherited this condition that I don't agree with, is the 21 and over. We have to be 21 and over. Right now we're not, we're 18. And when I was a young teen, I had always loved comedy, I wanted to be a comedian. My dad would take me, no other choice, but the only comedy club that allowed me to go, the Ha Ha Comedy Club. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to pursue my career, my dream to be a comic, and I would be 3 years behind in my career hadn't it been for this club. So by this new business, well, not new, but it's just moving, we're allowing it to be 18 and over. You're allowing comics to come and pursue their dream and work out and practice their craft. So I don't think it's fair for these people to inherit these conditions that somebody else has brought upon them. You know what I mean? So that's all.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Greg Buckman. How is everybody?
Okay, here we go. You got 2 minutes.
Well, that's longer than a minute.
All right.
I just want to say I love Jack and his wife and his whole family, and they create loads of jobs, and I got my start in stand-up comedy there. So did so many other great comics and stuff, and they do great things for the community. We've never had any problems or anything like that, and that neighborhood's really coming along with a lot of businesses now, and he was there before they even showed up, and the neighborhood's just getting better and better and better. That's all I want to say. Wow. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good evening there, folks. My name is Robert Zapata. I just want to let you guys know that one thing about the Ha Comedy Club has brought a great positive atmosphere for all the tenants the community in the area. And because a lot of times people want to drive to Hollywood to get the laughs on, and they don't have to travel as far. They can stay within the area, especially like in the east part of the valley. They come here to the Ha, and the fact that it's doing so well, sometimes we have to turn away people, and I understand why they're relocating the Blue Moon, because it's a lot larger. They can hold more people, which will be a positive thing for the community. You know what I mean? And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, council members. Thanks
Hello.
for your time. My name is April O'Connor. I'm a comic, and I'm also a former resident of the neighborhood. I've seen what the Blue Moon had been, chaos to the neighborhood, loud music, seedy patrons, drugs, and this is definitely not what the HaHa will bring to the neighborhood. They're already there. They're already a viable part of the community and the arts district, and to be able to have it be 18 plus also would be beneficial, because children and the youth need to have an opportunity to perfect their craft. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dean Zarbaugh, and I got my start at the HaHa Comedy Club as well. I've been performing for the last 3 years now. It's a great place. It's a place where I want to take my family to see me perform. The noise level, it's nothing. Like, comedians, we don't like when people interrupt and talk to us when we're on stage. So our noise level is going to be down. We're not kind of people that want to interrupt. It's a live performance. We don't want to be interrupted. We don't want to be loud. We don't want to be a disturbance to other people. We just want to make people laugh. And that's all I got to say. Have a good one.
That sounded like a committee member, but go ahead.
My name is Jacob Bunny. I also the first place that I performed in LA was HaHa, and it is a great atmosphere. It is a lot more family friendly than I would say a seedy club, and I don't think it's fair to delay the thing, the appeal, just because based on the reputation of someone else's deeds, as well as the fact that the people who are against it haven't had an opportunity to do the proper research on HaHa Cafe. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 2 more to go. Hello, sir.
I'm Josh DiDonato. I'm a comedian, and I authored the notes that I think Jack maybe passed around. I just want to say I have not officially passed the bar in California or anywhere. So you should know that I'm not an attorney, and please don't say that I am. And I want to say I'm a big Planning and Land Use Management Committee fan. I have all your minutes. Big fan. All right. Really the hours of operation issue. A comedy club, to be taken seriously, has to be able to stay open until 2 a.m. The Improv, the Laugh Factory, the Comedy Store, any comedy club that wants to be taken seriously has to have the option of being open until 2 a.m. to be a fully functioning comedy club. They don't always stay open until that time, but that really is like an important part of and people spoke about the age requirement also, and the nature of the comedy club business is such that there's a significantly lower amount of noise than at a DJ band type of dance club type situation. And that's it. Please take care of your legislative assistant on the way out.
Okay, will do. And we'll send you our committee report.
Hi, I'm Fraser Smith. I'm a DJ and a ski instructor, and I guess I'm closing this.
The closer.
Yeah, I think an important factor is how diligent Jack and his wife Terry are about customers who come in, checking IDs, making sure that no one who's underage. They're always very diligent about that. And also, traditionally, I think the customer that goes to a comedy club is different than a nightclub customer. Nightclub customer sticks around all night drinking. Really, when the show's over, the customers here basically go home. after their 2-drink minimum, and I think that's pretty traditional. So it's been a much quieter scene. I've been going there for 15 years. I've never heard one complaint from a neighbor or one incident in all that time, or anyone that's really had an incident or any kind of problem there at the club. So I think they've got a great track record, and I think that's what's going to bring to the new location.
This is the Fraser Smith of K-Rock.
That's right, my friend. That's
All right.
Represent.
A lot of
Thank
good
you.
times with you.
Thank you, buddy, and I'd like to thank Chad Lowe.
All right.
My name is Joe Greenberg. I'm an entertainment manager. I've been in the business since 1968. I managed Alice Cooper, Ann Murray, Pink Floyd, a whole bunch of others. I've been to every state in the union. I've seen clubs. I was at the Whiskey A Go-Go the first night Led Zeppelin played here, and they were just awarded the medal, Congressional Medal of Honor. I got to say that of all the clubs I've seen, this club is probably the best run. It's the best feeling. I've been to the Improv here. Live across the street from the Laugh Factory. Fillmore East, Fillmore West, Fillmore South, Fillmore North, you name it, and they run a great club. I love to see soldiers there. They do a lot of stuff for the troops, and I think whatever they want to do, they're going to do a great job. It's going to be the best club in America. You should give him a pass. He's the best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. So, Carol, would like to come on up? So your recommendation is to...
Council members, again, for full disclosure, it's nothing against the HaHa. I actually, from my high school days, I would visit the HaHa, and it is a good establishment. That being said, we can't do this on the fly. We actually need to be, we need to have the public input from the immediate neighbors who had originally brought the concerns to our office and to Council District 4. So what we would like to do is, at this moment, deny the appeal, sustain the recommendation of the zoning administrator. I will have a lot of fun moving forward in dealing with this issue and working with HaHa and in getting to a point where they can be operational at this location. I just don't think that it can be done on the fly without the neighbors having their input.
Okay. Councilman, go ahead.
This area most of the neighborhoods, the single-family homes, they're near gated communities?
Oh, I'm sorry, council member.
The homes around that area, are they around gated communities?
No, we don't have gated communities per se. I believe the immediate adjacent one is a condominium complex.
That's because I live in a gated community. I have gated windows, gated doors.
Let's chalk it up to fatigue. You were tempted, right? You had to do it. All right.
And I'm even happy to work with the applicant between now and council to see if and work with the immediate neighbors to see if there's something that can be done in that time frame. But I believe that the most appropriate path is a new plan approval and a quick hearing, hopefully, that the community comes out and loves this idea.
Okay, so Mr. Brown, if I may, come on up, sir.
In 3 months, I'll have 30 years with the city of Los Angeles, and I'll have to rethink my retirement if I can hold a hearing that will be this entertaining.
You want to have it at the HaHa Club?
I do want to note, though, that what you heard earlier from LAPD is very important. Now, this is not a question just of who they are. This is a question also of the property itself. It has no parking. The outdoor patio area is right adjacent to residential. We are concerned about the noise, and these are things that we need to discuss more and deliberate on. So while these are good ideas, I think the proper venue for that would be another hearing with the zoning administrator.
So we will, by supporting the council office and denying the appeal and sustaining the zoning administrator's decision, it'll allow you the opportunity to address those concerns. Okay, and that'll be the action of this committee? Yes. Okay, thank you very much, and maybe I'll drop in on you guys. Incognito, and it's cool to hear from Fraser Smith. That was really nice. All right. So, thank you, LAPD, for your hard work and your patience as well. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item.
The next item, Councilman, is an appeal by Cebush Nayeri. Mr. Emilio Gutierrez is a representative, and it has to do with a disapproval of a general plan amendment for a 40-unit apartment building in CD 14.
Mr. President, Mr. Chair, let's just, we've had this item come to committee numerous times, and my office has attempted to work with the applicant to come up with a design that is a bit more conducive to what we'd like to see the new Boa Heights look like. But at the same time, we've been speaking with staff and others about the need to follow guidelines as to what we can and cannot approve. In order for us to just save time, we've heard this a number of times. I'm going to ask that we move to grant the appeal and overturn the City Planning Commission decision and send to council, and instruct planning staff to draft findings and conditions, and instruct the clerk to schedule for council consideration as soon as possible. So that's approving the project, essentially.
Approving the project.
Yeah.
I'm assuming Emilio Gutierrez and Norbert Flores are okay with that?
I mean, if the applicants, I think they're the only speakers here?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
And the
Our
neighbor.
neighbor's here. Okay, we have.
One neighbor does oppose?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Mr. Norbert Flores?
Nothing's going to happen today as far as approval or not, or?
Well, we want to hear from you first. Let's hear from you first.
Let's hear from you first.
Okay, well, basically, I think a lot of the things I question about that, there's agencies that could cover that as far as, the unsafe factors involved, in my opinion. And since I am the only person that lives there between 1st and 4th Street, I'm the only one that's here to represent the people that I feel that would be in jeopardy if this thing was allowed to pass. The course is so close to the freeway that there's going to be problems with that. In fact, we took some information and left it at your office. And also, up to 80 cars leaving in the morning, that could create gridlock on 3rd Street, plus in the property itself. Also, another major problem is there's 2 lanes and a center lane, which the ambulances and paramedic vehicles always use. So if there's another addition of up to 80 cars in the center lane, they couldn't get to the hospital. And every moment matters, I went, the little note I gave to you was a response when I talked to somebody this last Saturday in the area where the ambulance was. He wrote me this, he talked about the response time. He was really concerned about that, and that's everything. So they can get somebody to the hospital and save their life. And then, the doctors and nurses are waiting there. They're communicating that way. And if they couldn't use that, it would take longer to get there, and people are going to die, I think, in the ambulance before they get there to the hospital, which is has a state-of-the-art emergency facility, including state-of-the-art entrance for the paramedic vehicles, which come from the fire department, and also the chartered ambulances that work through, for the White Memorial Hospital. I talked to an individual that knows people, a high position at the White Memorial Hospital. They want to know about this, and so they can give you their opinion about the importance of the ambulances getting in time to treat the people that need help.
And this is White Memorial?
I'm sorry?
The White Memorial Hospital?
White Memorial Hospital, right. I'm sure Mr. Wizard knows about that, and everything. So, 8 years ago, I find out I want negative blood. I give blood to the Red Cross every, So, and then I'm among the people that only have the universal blood. So every time I do that, up to 3 people live and not die. So in fact, I went right this past Friday, Saturday, to give blood. And to me, the same thing can happen here, and I don't want that to happen, just as a responsible citizen.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to continue with my motion that we approve the project, and I share the public speaker's concerns, and that's why we've held it numerous times. We were concerned about some pedestrian access issues. However, sir, we were concerned as well with the legality of us not approving the application itself. So we're hoping that the developer could come back with a site plan and some landscaping plans that will be approved by planning and seen by our office, so we can make it more compatible with the surrounding area. The surrounding area is zoned for what this applicant is asking to be zoned, and there is an issue about whether they have the right to do that, and it makes sense from a planning perspective. We're trying to work with the developer to make sure that it's more congruous and fits into the local neighborhood. So that's what we will be doing on the final design and site plan. But at this time, I've been advised that for some possible legal issues that we have to move forward and approve this item. So I'll move that we approve it with my initial motion.
Okay, now I'll second that with the understanding that you're going to have this whole process for the elements that you already discussed. So that we look forward to that. Okay, any other items? And so that will move forward based on recommendation of the staff and the council member of the district. Anything else, Roberto?
No, just public comment.
Anybody here for public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.